Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome to the 2023 EDDMapS Summit. My name is Christy Trifone-Millhouse, and I'm the Executive Director here at NESMA. I'd like to give a special shout out to our co-host for this event, the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. Thanks to Chuck Bargeron and his team for helping to put together this summit and for making this all possible. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Go ahead and say hello in the chat and share with us where you're watching from. We always like to see the geographic range of our participants. You'll also see a poll posted in the chat with a few questions. Please take a moment to complete those few short questions. All questions below in the Q&A section if there's any lingering questions after the summit. And please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to connect with you and connect you to our presenters after the session. As you know, these types of events require an incredible amount of investment of time, talent, and treasure. In addition to our co-host, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors: the Washington Invasive Species Council, Montana Department of Agriculture, Invasive Species Center, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, Utah Weed Supervisors Association, Colorado Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Invasive Species Advisory Council, and the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. Okay, so before we jump into our webinar, I'd like to share with you a bit about NESMA. The North American Invasive Species Management Association is committed to our mission of empowering the management of invasive species in North America. Over the last few years, our organization has grown by leaps and bounds as we continue to expand programming in ways our founding members never thought possible. Look at all those happy people from our hurricane event in Florida last year. NESMA works to create bridges across geographic divides and jurisdictions in North America, and we connect land and water resource managers and professionals by developing and supporting international standards, consistent messaging, and promoting tools and training that support their work. It is our job and mission to support all of you. Here are just a few of the program opportunities that NESMA offers to its members in the larger invasive species community. We are the stewards of international standards, including the NESMA mapping standards and the Certified Weed-Free Products Program. We also serve as a voice advocating for invasive species management through our annual National Invasive Species Awareness Week. We provide tools for education and outreach through our Play Clean Go program. And finally, support the invasive species management community through our education programming, including monthly webinars, summits like this one you're attending, our Invasives U Asynchronous Learning Library, and our annual conference. Speaking of the annual conference, mark your calendars for this year's event. Plan to join us in Lincoln, Nebraska from October 16th through the 19th. We'd love for you to join NESMA members, our co-host, the Nebraska Invasive Species Council, and other invasive species managers and professionals in North America to enjoy sessions focused on all aspects of the invasive species management world. Last year, we had over 90 sessions with topics focusing on all taxa in all geographies in North America. Our theme this year is Foundations for Success. So we want to share your success stories about projects and programs that are yielding positive results. We've had some amazing keynotes selected for this event, and our call for abstracts went out this week. So things are rolling. Keep up with all things annual conference on our website and through NESMA Communications. If you're not getting emails from us, go ahead and go to nesma.org and get updates delivered to your inbox as they become available. So there's a place there that you can sign up to receive communications. Did you know we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we depend on generous donations, grants, and membership gifts to continue to provide many of these incredible benefits to our over 750 members and now over 11,000 subscribers. That's a lot of folks connected to our work. If you're not a member, please become one today. All right, it's time to get started. I'd like to turn things over to NAISMA's Education and Prevention Manager, Lindsay Cathcart.
Thanks, Christy. So we're just going to do some brief housekeeping, and then we will get going. We've got a big schedule for the day. For everyone watching, please be sure to put any questions or comments you have for the presenters in the Q&A section. If there's time with each presentation, we'll try to cover any of those questions, but if not, we will plan to end the session this afternoon with some questions as well. Presenters, if you see questions in there that you're able to answer, feel free to fill those in as we go. You can also see if somebody's asked a question and you want to ask the same question, you can give it a little thumbs up and that'll move it up the queue and it'll be more likely to get asked. All right, well, now we will get on with the main event. First, we're going to hear from Chuck Bargeron. Chuck has been with the University of Georgia for 24 years, where his work focuses on invasive species and information technology. Recently, Chuck has focused on mapping invasive species and tools for early detection and rapid response using EDDMapS and smartphone applications. Chuck has been an invited speaker at over 300 regional and national conferences and has co-authored over 62 journal articles and outreach publications. All right, Chuck, I will stop sharing so you can go ahead and bring up your slides.
I just kind of have to unmute, don't I? All right, thank you, Christy and Lindsay, and I will dive right in after I thank again the NAISMA and our sponsors for making this happen again this year. So I'm Chuck Bargeron, the director of the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, or Bugwood as we go by, and as our website is, and what we're located in Tifton, Georgia, which is about an hour north of the Florida line, and we are a unit of the University of Georgia that is a collaboration between the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences and the School of Forestry and Natural Resources. And what we focus on is outreach and using information technology and partnerships to really solve problems in a very practical way. Our team at the university, Joe LaForest is the associate director, Rebecca Wallace is the EDDMapS program coordinator, Selena McAllister, both of which you're going to hear from today. Selena McAllister helps us keep the books going, and then we have a team of programmers and specialists that help make everything that you're going to see today possible. And we really could not do this without this great team. As well as our extensive partners through the years that have helped fund and make EDDMapS possible. So thanks to all of them who have contributed and helped make this a free tool available to everyone. All right, so I'm going to give a brief overview of what EDDMapS is, assuming most of you know it, but we'll start off with that, kind of give an update of where things are and some recent updates to the website, and then kind of look at what we're going to talk about today. So EDDMapS, the name came from the concept that it really did two things. It was for early detection. It was an early detection EDR system, as well as a tool for distribution mapping. And so when we talk about EDDMapS, we talk about the entire system, which includes the real-time tracking of invasive species and pest occurrences, local as well as national distribution maps, having a tool for electronic, easy early detection reporting, as well as the vast library of pictures and information included in the resources at the center. So why did we create EDDMapS? So we were trying to solve problems of where are these species found across the United States and Canada. And by doing that, we needed to make it very easy to report things, and we needed to also help build the awareness of the public to the problem of invasive species, because you're never going to get somebody to report something if they don't know that this is a problem they should be looking at. And then to help partners on the ground level have a tool where they can not have to think about the technology. They don't have to think about somebody managing their data, but being able to have everything they need in one package to solve that problem. And then being able to take that local level and zoom out and see at a landscape level, or see at a continental level where these species are found, and then have that as the basis of which other tools can be built. And we're going to see a lot of that through the different presentations today. EDDMapS data is focused on occurrences of species or lack of occurrences of species. And when we talk about what data goes into EDDMapS, it's really the who, what, where, when, why, and how much. And so it's very simple. There's a lot of other fields, obviously, but that's the core of what the data needs to be. And then once that data is entered, it's going through the processes of early detection and rapid response. Who has jurisdiction of where this was reported? What was submitted actually correctly identified? And then what are our response options after that comes in? And then we wanted the data to be as accessible as possible. So this data is all publicly available unless there's some special privacy concerns around it, and in a standardized format where it can be easily incorporated into other applications, into models, into other tools. And once we kind of got that foundation built, then we wanted to think about different user groups and build different tools that focus for different user groups. And you're going to see a lot of that today as we talk about these different tools. A little bit of history. EDDMapS started around 2005 when the website was launched. In 2011, the first reporting app came out, which was I've Got One, which focused on Florida initially. Then we continued to build regional applications, the first one being in the Western United States. And those tools were really geared toward the public. Then we moved toward EDDMapS Pro, more professional tools, more things for specifically county weed managers and others to be able to use in the field to manage the data in the area that they manage. In 2021, we launched the EDDMapS app, which is moving toward being the replacement of the regional apps into one system where it's easier to maintain and upgrade over time. And so throughout this year, we're going to be retiring some of those regional apps. And then you've got just to kind of think about the components of EDDMapS, it's the EDDMapS website, it's the EDDMapS app, which is more of the general user tool, then the EDDMapS Pro tool that's got a lot of features to help manage that. And then the education and outreach part of EDDMapS. So this summit, the tools we have available, the archive of data, of presentations from previous summits, publications, presentations that are all there. So you, if you're training other people, can take that information and then use it yourself to help train others. A little bit of statistics. I'm a numbers guy. I like looking at the data. We've got right at 7.5 million records now. About 5.6 million of those have a lat long associated with them. The other about 2 million records are just at the county level. We've got 127,000 users registered within EDDMapS, of which about 40,000 of those have submitted, or 40,000 of those accounts have submitted data or used the system in some way. Most of what's recorded in EDDMapS are plants, and there's more species of plants recorded in EDDMapS than the other taxa, and you can see those numbers there. And as of a few weeks ago, EDDMapS reporters, when time has been logged, have logged over 21,000 hours of collecting invasive species occurrences. And here's just a look at some of the top data sources: Forest Service data set, and then some state databases, as well as the data from USDA plants and BOTA of North America. When you talk about data and you talk about databases, there's different types of databases when you talk about occurrences. And so, what we're trying to do with EDDMapS and the Wild Spotter platform we're going to talk about later is really have a national coverage, actually US and Canadian wide, of all taxa with all the appropriate tools that you need related to invasive species. And so there's other platforms, USGS's non-indigenous aquatic species database, a great tool, is focused and limited to aquatics. GBIF, which is a data aggregation platform for all occurrences, both invasive and non-invasive. Awesome tools, a lot of power for that tool. But again, you don't have some of the additional features that you have in the EDDMapS system. iNaturalist, built for biodiversity data, so you also do not have some of the features that you would need if you're using this to manage invasive species data. But there is a good place for iNaturalist, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We recently looked, you've got 40,000 users who have reported something. You've also got users who have signed up for alerts or verifiers. And so we looked at what our active users by year have been, and we like this, these are anybody who did something during that year. So, sometimes you're going to have people that do things multiple years, but it's good to look at this and see the steady growth over time. So just to kind of sum up what is EDDMapS, we built this to be this ultimate aggregator, but also tools at every level. And then now we're really focusing on how to use the data. And that's what you're going to see a lot in the presentations today. Quick overview of what this last year's looked like. We've averaged about 520 records per day. That's a 10% increase from last year. We're also seeing an increase in the total reporters, as well as a fairly large increase in the number of revisits this last year. Here's where the data that was entered in the last year has come from, which is a good speckling around the US and Canada, and obviously some of the larger county areas are going to have more reports just from the size. This to me is really great because we're not just seeing positive reports anymore. We're seeing more negative reports. We're seeing reports that are being marked as treated and eradicated. So that revisit concept and telling a better story is really getting out there in the last couple of years. Still getting a good amount of data from the smartphone apps, as well as using the web forms to enter the data. And as I mentioned previously, overall throughout EDDMapS, about 70% of the data in EDDMapS is plant related, and then it's insects, wildlife, and plant pathogens. Of all the reports submitted to EDDMapS, about 97% of those have been verified. So we've got this great network of now 942 verifiers that work with us, many of which are on the summit today. And these are the folks that look at the records and make sure what was reported is what it is, and then makes that information public through the EDDMapS system. Looking at the last year, by reports and revisits by state, a good steady amount from most of the states that have really been implementing this, and then with the work that Utah has done with their grant program, as well as with their revisits, obviously a large spike there compared to some of the other areas. And then this is overall. So overall, there was a lot of pest data that have gone in recently from New Jersey, as well as Florida. And then with the incorporation of the data from CalFlora from California, you've got a large amount of data from those states, and then some of the other states that we're seeing the more recent information as well. And then this it kind of tells that story even better, breaking it up by taxa, being able to look and see, okay, well, New Jersey, there's a lot of data, but a lot of that is insect data. And so that there's definitely a comparison there and where and how the data is being included. And then Canada, just looking at the provinces in Canada, a lot of plant data and some wildlife data in Alberta, some activity in other provinces, and then Ontario, where there's a lot of plant data, but then some wildlife and insect information as well. I want to do a shout out to Alberta. They've really done a lot of promotion in the last year and gone from 750 new reports coming in 2021 to over 4,000 reports coming in 2022, and now that is covering 614,000 acres of infested acres in Alberta, and so a great jump in their data in the last year with a good marketing campaign. I mentioned 97% of the data has been verified. This is kind of showing where the holes in that data are. There's a database that is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network that shares data with EDDMapS, but their data is not verified. So that's where a lot of this Michigan data is, and also a good chunk of the unverified data is sitting in that data set. And we're trying to find a verifier that will help us go through that data and turn that data into verified reports. Not only, we talk about reports coming in and all, but the EDDMapS website also gets a significant amount of traffic coming into it on an annual basis. And over the last, whatever that is, 7 or 8 years, we have data through Google Analytics. There's been about 8 million page views from about 1.6 million users. And I think that shows there's an interest and a need for this kind of data and being able to have it all in one place. Some of the other things that, there's 40,000 people with accounts in EDDMapS, only less than 2,000 of them have signed up for alerts. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested in finding out when new things are reported in your area, sign up for an account, go to My EDDMapS, go to user alerts, and you can sign up for what you're interested in. But we've sent 271,000 of those emails since February of 2020, as well as 65,000 verifier emails since September of 2021. So some recent updates. The next presentation is going to go more into EDDMapS Pro, but we continue to spend a lot of time on the EDDMapS Pro interface, integrating things like photo projects where you can take good before and after pictures. I think this example with the fan really shows that as much as anything, how you can line it up, the previous picture, and get really good before and after pictures of projects. Project areas, which is a little confusing, so they're going to be renamed as boundary areas, but a way that you can upload a KML file into the app and be able to see, boundary of the project you're working on while you're out doing the work. And then we've recently added a way to do a walk or a drive the polygon, and Jerry and Kevin are going to talk about that more in the next presentation. For EDDMapS Pro, there's a good series of short videos on how to get started, how to do different features within EDDMapS Pro that I would encourage you to check out. All of those are available on the EDDMapS website under Tools and Training. Some other updates to the EDDMapS Pro. We've added a way where you can jump to a record. So if you know the record ID, you can type in that record ID and jump to it on the map, jump to the boundary areas similarly. A way to better look at data on the iOS for stacked points, an auto upload option, so you don't have to remember to upload your records at the end of the day, as well as upload reminders. Some new ways to do projects within EDDMapS Pro, a walk to polygon feature I just mentioned, and then a way to bulk download those images from your photo projects. We've looking at how some of these newer features in EDDMapS Pro have been used. 120 different users have used the boundary areas, the project areas features. 1,200 users have generated different data packages and there's been 18,000 of those data packages generated. And then we're going to talk more about saved queries, but there's already been 135 users created 391 saved queries, as well as 981 photos as part of the photo projects. We've started getting good emails from Apple that really help us be able to monitor use as well as any crashes on the apps. And so here's an example of what we get on a weekly basis from Apple. So we know how many people saw the app in the App Store, how many new downloads there were in that past week, how many people used the app, opened the app, that's what the sessions are, and then if there were any crashes, what those were. And then we're getting crash reports emailed to Jordan, our iPhone programmer. So if you get a response to an email like this, it's probably because something happened with the app, and this email goes to Jordan. He gets all the information on what's wrong, and usually can walk you through a solution as the issue is being fixed. Along those lines, something we're going to be adding soon is a progress bar when we're doing those uploads. So you'll be able to see what record is being uploaded and what the progress of that is, just in case you have bad cell coverage or something that's causing it to be slow. Another feature that we haven't talked very much previously in these summits about is the literature reporting tool. This is a feature we built so we can take a map that's been put together like this of where beach leaf disease is, and then take that with proper citation and incorporate that data into EDDMapS. So then the users can track that data in EDDMapS, but then it gives the citation here to where the data originally came from. Another thing that I think is really great about the way we built the reporting forms is they can be embedded in your websites. And so Washington Invasive Species Council, they have a smartphone app, but they also on their website have incorporated the EDDMapS reporting form. If you're logged into EDDMapS, when you go there, it knows who you are. If you're not logged in, it asks for some simple information when you're submitting the form, and then it handles that in the reporting process. So something that, if you would like the reporting form to be integrated on your agency's website, just reach out to us and we'll be glad to work with you in doing that. And then here's another example where South Carolina Department of Natural Resources is doing a similar thing with incorporating the reporting forms directly on the website. All right, so I mentioned iNaturalist earlier. iNaturalist is a huge citizen science database of about 129 million records now for all over the world. And what we got concerned about was that regulatory or species of concern that we in the invasive species community are interested in get reported to iNaturalist, and we don't have a way to know about them unless you go to iNaturalist and look for them. So we built a way to take the data, query iNaturalist, and say, okay, how many records are there of things that somebody has said are invasive? And so it's about, as of a few weeks ago, 3.7 million records in the US and Canada in iNaturalist that are of species of concern. And so of those, through our verifiers, we've been able to move almost 500,000 of those into EDDMapS. We've been able to ignore about another 300,000 of those just because they were things that the state was not concerned about tracking at the time, or they were native to that part of the country. And so this is a little skewed because the Cal Florida data shows up here as well. So, but this is kind of looking at the different states and where and how much data has come in through iNaturalist. And then if you look at the remaining records in triage, it kind of gives you an idea of where those records exist. This data, again, can be a little bit misleading when you go to this slide and you look at what those are data of. And so, there's some common, some birds that there's not a lot of tracking going on, in the invasive species community of. like Canada goose and European starling, that there's a good chunk of data that we're probably going to go through and clean up some of this data. But there's also some things like tree of heaven and garlic mustard and Phragmites that are things that are actively being worked on in areas. And so, as you're thinking about this, if you're a verifier and whether or not, data should go and be triaged and moved in the EDDMapS, focus on those high priority species to start with. We've enhanced that a good bit lately where you can do county level triage. You also can filter the list by your state list. You can set up email and notifications for when the pool comes into EDDMapS. You can filter by taxonomic group, hide species that are native to somewhere in the US, and then also select species and do a bulk action on them. And here's what that interface looks like. So, here's an example of in Georgia, let's just say Chinese privet. There's an additional 661 records. There's already 3,000 records in there. And so you could select those and decide whether you bulk verify them or you send them to the verifiers. I will warn you that there's a couple of issues we've run into with our naturalist data, one of which is for ornamental species. The checkbox of captive cultivated doesn't always get changed to yes. And so even if you look at this picture in the background, that's probably a planted calorie pear with the brick in the background. And so, that this record went through as research grade because it's got two people agreeing on the identification, but it probably shouldn't have because it's probably a planted calorie pear tree and not an escaped one. The other issue that comes in is coordinates can be set to obscured or to private. And if it's obscured, and you don't notice that when you're looking at it, then it won't be the actual location on the point. So just a few things to keep in mind related to the iNaturalist data. All right, talking about website updates. We continue to add materials to the training materials page. And here's just a look at that page. The summit videos for this year will be added here probably next week once the recording is broken up. All the virtual office hours that we started last year, we've had what we appreciate is good attendance on this. Averaging about 30 or more people each month. Those are on the third Fridays of the month from 11 to 12:30 Eastern, and we will start those again in May of this year. To the dashboard, we recently added a download PowerPoint button here, and that allows you to take all the data on the dashboard and download it into to whatever view you're looking at on your dashboard, the EDDMapS dashboard, that is. Download that data into a PowerPoint file that then you can edit and use to present, in a state report or in a county report. We've added a way to do bulk revisits, and Rebecca's going to talk about this feature later. I mentioned earlier being able to do a download of all the images as part of a photo project. And then downloading data, a quick thing I want to mention on that is saved queries. This is a way that you can create a query, save it, and then rerun it again or download it into EDDMapS Pro and use it that way. So a way you can look for a specific group of information and get that information into EDDMapS Pro. When people think about EDDMapS, usually what they think about is the distribution maps. But I wanted to go through this real quick. For most of the major species, we also have fact sheets related to those species. We have links to other resources. You can see down here on the bottom of the page. We have selected images. We have the distribution maps. We have who lists this species as invasive. What are the sources for that? As well as the full taxonomic ranks, synonyms for it, links to the plants database and other data sets, and then where we got the common name and scientific name for. So for every species in EDDMapS, all of that information is available. We look at and talk a lot about the point maps, but but there's some unique features of some of the county maps where you can look at the distribution by county. You can also look at density by county. You can look at what is literature reports, what are the old herbarium and plants database reports, and what are observations, and then having the options to look at some models in these as well. And Annette's going to talk about these models and how they work and what this information means at a later presentation today. And to kind of wrap this up, last year we talked about incorporating locations, other geographic locations into the records. And I showed this example of a record in Dinosaur National Monument, and how, now this record, because it is located in that public area, then is credited that way. So what we've now done is made those locations clickable at the bottom of the page. So here's an example of a park outside of in Auburn, Alabama, where you can click on the state park and it takes you to a map that shows you everything within that state park with the boundary surrounding it. You can turn on and off positive, treated, eradicated, and negative records. You can also pull records in a buffer and miles around this area. And then what's really cool at the bottom of the page, you get a list of what species are found. You can download that as a PDF, as an Excel file. I'll show you that in just a second. One thing that's interesting here is, you can look at it and go, okay, well, there's a lot of thorny olive, but then there's also the Agnes records as well. Maybe some of those are actually thorny olive, and a way to kind of look at that data and go, hey, those may need to be fixed, or maybe we just didn't know what species it actually was. Here's an example of one in Minnesota with a congressional district, and then showing the species list and how you can download that as a PDF or as an Excel spreadsheet. And we're going to continue to improve this in the interface for this, where you can get this data in even better ways. This has now been added under database tools, so species status reports by other geographic locations, and you can even go in and see those geographic locations by county or jurisdiction. So in this example, I chose Georgia, I chose Tift County, and then here's a park in Tift County where there's some reports, as well as in this case, I had a 5-mile buffer around it. A few things we're working on related to EDDMapS that are coming soon. We're continuing to improve the educational materials and the training hub. We are updating the advanced query tool. That's something you'll be seeing coming out soon. And then we built a way to help process uploads quicker, and Rebecca's going to talk about that later. We're continuing to update the dashboards, and Aaron's going to show some of the work they've done in Utah around dashboards a little bit later. Looking at data like this example, and I'm not going to run all of this, but this is an example showing really the power of data, going from the 70s into the 80s, into the 2000s, and then to now. When you have this good data set of historical data, the story you can tell about how something started small and has spread from there. And then also being able to take that, and here's a recent Python map that was done using EDDMapS data, showing the spread over time with that data. We're continuing to support and build the tools like EDDMapS iBiocontrol, EDDMapS Biocontrol, and there's going to be a new version of the EDDMapS, the iBiocontrol app coming out very soon, and they're going to integrate the recent fact sheets that were developed through NASMA as part of those. So with the agents information as well as with the weed information included in that app. We've talked about the ISM track tool in the past. That's another tool that's continuing to be developed and improved. We're building plugins to make it very easy to incorporate this data into your own website, doing things like drone imagery, taking advantage of new GPS technology as it comes out in the newer iPhones and watches, where you can really get good accuracy, sub-meter, meter accuracy on a phone, on a watch. And then finally, we're looking at ways to incorporate better image recognition and have done some tests where we're seeing some good results on it being able to look at the species and compare it to existing pictures and then tell with a pretty good percent probability what it is. We recently had a summit in Utah. I want to thank the people that were able to attend the not summit, but a strategic planning session focused on terrestrial weeds in the Western US, and there'll be a report coming out of that very soon. This slide is for later, but we will be doing a survey at the end of this meeting. We'll put that in the chat. But if you're not going to be on all day and you want to grab this, you can scan the QR code or go to tinyurl.com/EDDMapS23 and take this survey at the end of the day. So we've got a great lineup for talks. I'm a minute over, so I'm going to speed through this. But if you can stick around or view some of these later, there's a good lineup of some of the different ways EDDMapS is being used across the country with some really interesting examples. So thank y'all for joining us today. And remember that, everything we're talking about is available for y'all to use and to help solve your problems on the ground. So thank you very much. And there's my email address if you have questions, and we'll be answering those in the chat as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Chuck. Next, we are going to hear from Kevin Bailey from Juab County, Utah, and Jerry Caldwell in Twill County, Utah. If you both want to go ahead, share your screen, get started. Looks good.
It's good to be with you guys and to be able to share a few things with you. Like Lindsay said, we kind of represent the Utah Weed Supervisors Association. Jerry and I do. He's the president, and I'm kind of the secretary, treasurer, do all the other things that Jerry doesn't want to do. So with that, we're going to jump right into some of the EDDMapS Pro functions and where we really need to start with this, so that when we get to the walk the polygon, you guys will kind of understand where we're coming from and what that entails. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is you guys have all seen this, and if you haven't, I encourage you to get signed up and learn about how to do some of these things. So if you go to eddmaps.org, you sign in, and you're going to go to My EDDMapS, and this is kind of that same page that Chuck showed there. And I'm going to talk about 5 things here, and these 5 things generate onto EDDMapS Pro. And so the first one that's really important is my species list, and that can be by state, or you can go in and individually add those species. Another one that Chuck talked about is my saved queries. You can save those queries, and then it is unique to the user, and you can transfer that and have that on your device for the EDDMapS Pro. The next one is number 3 is my county list. And again, you can go, it's user friendly, and it transfers over, you kind of create it on eddmaps.org, and then you have it on your device. Photo projects, it's been a long time coming. It's a great to be able to monitor, and like Chuck said, you can really mirror those images and go back year after year, and you have data over time. The next one is project areas. You can create your project areas on eddmaps.org, and then you can have that on EDDMapS Pro. And one nice thing about photo projects and project areas is that if you have multiple users that you want to share these with, or they're out in the field, you can do that with multiple users, and it transfers right over to their sign in as they go to EDDMapS Pro. So let's move on over to the app. So our opening screen, again, you have to log in like you do, and it'll save it as you go through and work. But this is kind of the opening screen when you open that up. And you can see our data that's right there. So the side that we're going to talk about first is the app settings. And these, again, are generated from eddmaps.org. So we've talked a little bit about the invasive map. You can see our point data there. The next one that we're going to discuss is photo projects. And so these are individual ones that I have, and then Jerry and I have a few that we share back and forth because we border each other, and we can share those. And if he's out there, he can take a picture. If I'm out there, I can take a picture, and we know, and it gets uploaded, which is really nice and handy to be able to have that multiple users to be able to see those. Our next one is our county data sets. I really like being able to see data from all the counties that surround my border. So I have that set up from eddmaps.org, and I go through, and like I said, Jerry and I work on some of our projects that are right on the border, and we can toggle those on and off when we're working there. And if I revisit something, he'll see it. If he revisits something right there on my county, then I'll see it. The next one is the saved query sets. Like I said before, you go in, it's kind of that same advanced query tool. You create that. In 2021, I wanted to go and see what Russian knapweed points I had. So I created that, and I can go right out to each individual point that I have with that saved query. So we have a unique thing here out in Utah is that we have some of the counties that don't have cell service all the time, which is good and bad for users. So we created with Chuck some aerial maps, and the only downfall with the aerial maps that we have here is that if you zoom into a certain point, you can't, it just goes wide if you zoom clear in, but it's really nice if you back out your zoom, and then you're able to see those areas. However, on the offline road maps, we kind of figured that we can zoom in if we have these offline maps. And again, we created those here in Utah, and then we sent them to Chuck, and then he worked his magic on these. The project areas, we specifically use this quite a bit, specifically for some of the projects that we have. Again, you can create those on eddmaps.org, and a lot of these that I have here are just from some of our contractors. They just give us a KML, and then I can go and I can just upload it, and it works perfect, and I can go and see exactly where they're at or what they've been doing. The upload queue. So this is where everything goes. When you save it, the new observations, revisits, photo points, contested records, verified records, monitoring zones, all of that goes into here, and you'll see that here at the end of the presentation when we actually upload that Waka polygon. One thing that you've got to remember about your settings is that if you change anything on eddmaps.org, you'll want to go to the app settings first. You'll want to be able to refresh that species list, your state species list, and then also your refreshed project species, so that you'll have the best data right then, and it'll all be updated however you move that around. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the other side of the map, and that's where you press the gears, and then it pulls up these map settings, and I'll go down through these as well. So this is what will show from the apps. So the offline options, which we talked about, the offline aerial maps and the offline road maps, you can toggle those on and off depending on, like I said, we have lots of area where there's no cell phone coverage, and so the map that you see when you're in coverage isn't going to be the same out in those areas. Auto follow, if you're tracking to some of the points that you can see on your map, it's really nice to have that heading, or along with being able to keep your direction on your device. So the next one is the map type. Most maps you can do this to. You can have it on normal, satellite, or terrain. It just depends on what your preferences is, but you can change that right there on the map type just by selecting that. So the data to display, this is the data that's going to display on your map. So right now I have records checked there. As you can see, that's the county, specifically Juab County. And I've got that selected. You can't select multiple things. So if you unselect, or if you click down to my saved query, then it automatically, that's what you see on your map. Or if you just want to see where all your photo projects in your area are, you click that, and the same with your monitoring zones. Or if you want to see everything that Chuck talked about, is if it's unverified, you can turn that on and you can see what's unverified. The next one is filter by state list. And so we can filter again by Utah, and we can do that for other states as well. The next one is filter by species. So if I don't want to see a lot of things, so sometimes I've got some areas like, take for example, alfalfa. I've got one point of that. I don't necessarily need to see that on my map, but if I can filter that off, I can filter it on. It just depends on what you're doing. And again, it's user specific. The observation date, we like this specifically to be able to say, okay, what have we done in the last month, or what did we miss? The same thing as last 6 months, last 9 months. And that's the reason why this was created, and as well as last visited date. You can filter that out by. We can also filter by the status of your weed point, meaning that the positive meaning red, treated meaning yellow, eradicated meaning green, and then negative is a blue color that you'll see on your map. And that's what you can filter all of those. And then again, if you filter something, you can go and you can unmark all those filters, and then it'll clean the slate again. So the last thing that we want to talk about is walk a polygon. This is a new feature. So what we're going to do here is we're going to press the plus sign on the bottom right hand side of the screen. And this is the new feature is the walk a polygon. And so when you press that, it's going to pull up with this, and it looks the same, but you'll start everything down on the bottom. So if you want to select the interval of having that, whether it's 1 second, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, you've got kind of 3 options that you can choose of how many points that it's going to take as you walk around that polygon. One thing that you've got to remember is that even though you press the plus sign, you've got to, when you go to start walking the polygon, you've got to press the start. And then you start walking all the way around that polygon. And as you can see, it's kind of that purple mark on the screen, and it'll start logging, and you go all the way around until you get back to your starting point. Again, one thing that we really do want to mention is try not to overlap those polygons, because it kind of does wig the system out a little bit, and it does with anything. But if you know where you're walking and how you're doing it, just keep that in mind. So once we get to that point, we're gonna press done when we've completed that, and that saves that information. When you click the done, it clicks you over to where you've got to go ahead and you've got to add your species. This is where you're going to add your data, and then you're going to add your photo, take your photo of the area, which is really important. And then again, the observation data is you can put time spent, you can put the density, and then it automatically, because you walked around that polygon, it's going to create the 0.26 acres in there. Now, there's 2 things on the status thing is if we were just out monitoring and we gathered up that information, that's what shows, or you can say treated. And with that, again, Jerry and I are around. This is where the upload queues go, and once you save it, it goes into the upload queue, and you can upload it from there. I think with that, that's it. And Jerry and I will try to field questions if there's any questions in the chat.
Great, thanks so much, Kevin and Jerry. All right, next we're going to hear from Rebecca Wallace. Kevin, if you want to stop sharing, and Rebecca, you can pull your slides up. Rebecca joined the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health at the University of Georgia as the EDDMapS Data Coordinator in 2011. She graduated from Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in 2005 with an AS in Agriculture, University of Georgia in 2007 with a BS in Agriscience and Environmental Systems, and in 2009 with an MS in crop and soil science with an emphasis on weed science. In 2010, Wallace worked at Henderson Beach State Park in Destin, Florida as an AmeriCorps member, where she scouted and identified native and invasive plant species, presented interpretive programs, and developed invasive plant identification and reporting material. She has a particular interest in data sharing and preservation and works to ensure that data is accurate and broadly available. All right, go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about bulk data, so submitting bulk data and kind of how I work with it on the kind of EDDMapS side of things. So start off, why should people submit data? Just kind of in general, but a lot of different groups think, oh, I've got my own database, I've got my own thing going and it's working really well. So this is kind of to answer that question. It's really important to have a non-local storage for your data to prevent data loss. Some people just end up using like a cloud storage system, but that's just one way of doing it, just having, you know, a non-local storage. So not just your computer, not just your external hard drive that sits right next to your computer, but something offsite. Submitting your data is an easy way to share data. So in some cases, there are requirements that data has to be shared. So your funding source, your publishing source, data ownership rules, things like that require that data be available to the public. So this becomes an easy way to share data. The data is standardized to a known format. The data in EDDMapS is based on the NASMA standards. So there is a known format to this data. That means that your measurements will have units. Your coordinate system will be known and standardized, things like that. Also, by sharing your data to EDDMapS, you'll have access to some of those dashboards and visualization tools that Chuck just talked about. So you don't have to build all these things, they already exist. So how to submit? So Chuck and Kevin talked about different ways to submit data. So this is specifically talking about submitting bulk data. You would first click on My EDDMapS and then bulk uploads. It'll take you to this uploads page. On the right-hand side, we have helpful resources. So data templates, data dictionaries. These are to help you identify what fields exist, what data types are, what fields or data are required or optional, things like that. And then on the left, we have where you can click to upload your data. And then after you upload your data, you can view your uploads and what the status is and so forth. You will, on clicking to upload data, you'll drag or add your files to the file uploader, because that's what this is. It's a place to put your files. And then we currently accept Excel files and ArcGIS files. Information or metadata type files, just anything to help us interpret your data. Then you would click upload. After you click upload, you're going to see this pop up say, hey, we've got a bunch of questions for you. And what this does is most of the data that comes in there's no metadata associated with it. So this questionnaire is to help fill in the common gaps that exist with the data that's provided to us. So these 14 questions will ask you about the data and to make sure that you have all of the data included, you know, all of the required information, all of the files that are needed, things like that. So what happens after you submit? You go through the questionnaire and, then it comes to me. This says previously. So when I say previously, I mean, like, in the last, within the last, couple weeks. I manually check the data for issues. I upload the data to a temp table in our database. That allows me a space to convert fields and data into values that are accepted into our database. And then it gets uploaded into the data table with the rest of the EDDMapS data. So when I talk about data checks and data issues, I'm looking at, is the data complete? Are all parts of ArcGIS files present? So I've said in the past, oh, send us your shape file. The .shp is just one file of the many that are needed to interpret a shape file. So I'm, those are among the questions that are asked. Again, is required information there. Chuck talked previously about the who, what, when, where, and so forth. There are also other sometimes conditionally required fields like units for infested area and things like that. Is the data unique? I'm looking to make sure there are no duplicates in files. Many of the recent files I've gone through, most of the recent files I've gone through have had duplicates. One record, multiple records duplicated in the file. So that's what I'm looking for to make sure we're not artificially inflating, the issue that might exist in an area. Are the geographic shapes appropriate to the situation? I sometimes see autologger files come in. So, a point is dropped every, say, 10 seconds, 30 seconds as a sprayer is running along the roadside. And you have this huge trail of tracks along the way that, if you're just looking at numbers, will make it look like there's a massive problem of that species in that area, even though it might just be one stretch of road that has that issue. Another problem I'll see is where every instance of a species is represented as one record. It's just a huge multi-polygon that covers a whole county. That's not really appropriate because you're going to end up having polygons, pieces of the polygon, the multi-polygon, that are many, many, many miles apart. So that's not really an appropriate representation of what's going on. It also makes it look like, oh, there's one record of this species in this county. Well, sort of. There should be potentially 100 records. And then also we've occasionally gotten centroids that are centroids of the entire county itself. And in some of the questions we've already gotten about accuracy of points, that will just confuse the people whose job it is to follow up on these points. So, those are the types of things. This is a very small list so far of the types of things I look for, but any of these questions I have, I'll then work with the uploader on answering them. So just to give you a very small look into kind of the thought process that goes behind the files that are submitted. So what we can do now, we being currently me, is I have an interface where I can take the files that are sent and drop them in this file uploader here. And when I upload it, I get this pop-up. I get to look at a preview of the records, and that's the file on the left is an amalgamation of different, it was a test file. And then on the right, it helps me to match the field that came in with the field that it matches in our database, and also assists with conversions as needed. As you can see, I can see the file, a sample of the file that came in. I can look at the field names. I can match them to the field names in our database. I can set a conversion. I can ignore some of the fields that come in if they're like, because this on the left, it'll have the scientific name as well as a common name. We don't need both names, so I can ignore fields as needed. With ArcGIS files, it really hates to have nulls if it's a numeric field, so I can set nulls to 0, so it'll not put in zeros where they're not appropriate. The other thing we have is that where required fields are not included with the file, they can be added in as a default value in the next step. So if all of the data came in as treated records, but that information is not included in the file, I can add that in the next step. But it also looks for all of those errors I was talking about. So again, I was specifically using an error-filled file in this case. So it'll tell me what the error is and where it is, so that I can then either fix the file myself, or I can work with the uploader on fixing the data in it, or requesting an entirely new file if that's the case, if there's just too much wrong with it. There are current limitations. So right now it must have shapes or coordinates. We're working on the next version. Will have the ability for just state and county data to be accepted. We still require a visual inspection, so I still have to look at the file. I can't just take it and drop it in. I've got to are these autologger tracks? Are these county centroids? Is there something wrong with the file? Because some of these things we can't just automatically kick out based on the information in the file. We can't put in KMLs, access databases, things like that. We're still talking about Excel files, ArcGIS shaped files. We can't do necessarily ArcGIS databases because there's often relational tables going on in there and it can't parse that out. So we're talking about like the shape files, Excel files, CSV files, things like that. Controlled vocabulary options must be exact. So you can't misspell species names. You can't misspell the word eradicated if we're trying to pull in things where it's supposed to match something in a very exact way in our databases. So misspellings, alternative words, things like that will not be able to be tolerated. Currently, this might be a little confusing. The duplicate checker looks at duplicated data in the file and if a UUID already exists in our database. So if data is being provided to me with a UUID, it will check to see if that UUID already exists. But we can't do complex checks. So does this combination of location, date, species, and reporter already exist? That check can't happen at this point. It's a bit complex, but we're looking at version 2 to accommodate this. The main reason we started working on this uploader was to get Forest Service data in, so that NRIS data set that Chuck talked about at the beginning. That's updated throughout the year, but I can't work on it every month because it's many hundreds of thousands of records, and they're updating existing records. So one of the things we want to do is to be able to pull it, dump it in here, and the system will check for updates based off of, they don't use a UUID, but they do have what they call a primary key. So this is a system we're hoping to be able to use for things like the NRIS data set and other large federal or other types of data sets. It's also going to look for contradictory data. I mentioned some of that earlier, but it's based off of my experience and me remembering everything I've done. So I likely haven't thought of every single thing yet. So that's just a very broad view of the bulk upload and that data import tool. Right now, that data import tool is open to me. At some point, once we get through version 2, at the very least, we have talked about opening it up to some of our state partners for them to essentially assign people, I don't know what status they would be, but someone to be kind of I'm the data person for my state, and they'll work with the county people or below, city, regional, whatever, to get data in and put it in on their behalf. So that would be the next step, but that's after version 2 and after more testing is done and so forth. We might have time for one question. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box yet. So we might be on time. As they come in, I'll yes, please, yes, add a GUID, add a UUID to your data, because again, someone just asked, should that be added? Yes. That means that you have a copy of the exact record to talk about with me. If I create it, it's okay, but there could be some communication errors if you don't create it on your end to begin with. Do all GIS shape fields have the needed fields, or do they lack the proper fields? If you're talking about data submitted to me, it's whatever the person who created that file puts in there. I've gotten where it's literally just a shape and there's no other information associated with that file. So it's in the helpful resources I mentioned, we do include it's a spreadsheet, and it tells you, what fields are required. So if you're looking to build a GIS shapefile, then you can use those resources to help guide you on what fields would be required. Is there a video on how to create a GUID or a UUID? Most software will you can search on Google for how to do that. There's also websites out there that I need to create 200 UUID or GUIDs, and it'll spit them out for you, and you can copy and paste them into like Excel or something like that. But they're in the NASMA mapping standards at the back of it. I believe there are a number of links provided that help you to create UUID in, I think, 2 or 3 different types of software.
All right, thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll take a look actually when we get into our next presentation, if I can find that file and share it. But next we're going to move on to Aaron Eager, who is the State Weed Coordinator for the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. So Aaron, if you want to go ahead and pull up your slides, go ahead and do that. His responsibility includes the administration of the Utah Noxious Weed Act and rules supporting the regulatory measures for invasive species. Mr. Eager directs the activities of the State Weed Committee, Weed-Free Forage and Gravel, invasive species mitigation, along with regulatory ties into the seed, feed, nursery, and organic programs statewide. He has spent 19 years in integrated pest management, implementing Utah state law and rule from the county jurisdiction to statewide implementation. Mr. Eager is currently the chair for the Western Weed Coordinating Committee and just finished sitting on the NASMA Board of Directors and is as a member of the Biocontrol Committee, Governance Committee, Standards and Technology Committee, and Legislative Committee. So thanks, Aaron, for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Lindsay, for that introduction. So for the next, I guess, 20 minutes, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach that I want to show you. So I want to show you the why. So when Chuck talked about the where, when, who, what I want to show you is why do we do this? What is the importance of that data? And having it being collected and stored, and how can we use it, from a legislative level down to a state level, down to a county level, down to the public. So I'm going to show you how Utah is using this data, not only to promote our program and get that program out there to the public, but also to increase our funding and how that's actually worked over the last few years. So the first thing, and I'm doing this live, so there's going to be a little bit of a delay, but it's the best way to show it versus a PowerPoint. So just bear with me. So what I'd like to show you is we have our dashboard that we've built of invasive species that are regulated invasive species. And the reason we built this dashboard and are capturing all of this data from EDDMapS and then wanting to promote it through our website and through all of our CWMA websites is to get everybody involved in what's going on in Utah. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these, but I do want to cover just a few of them. That what we've done is taken the EDDMapS data, and EDDMapS is the core of everything you're seeing. It's what is driving and verifying all of our data. We also bring in the iBio, so all of our biocontrol is here. We have our monitoring that we are attaching to the mapping point. And then we display it on our site, and then we can actually show across the state of Utah, what is positive, what is treated, and what's been eradicated. This is easily used by legislators and by myself and other agencies to see, how are we doing in Utah? Are we making a difference? Should we be appropriating more money towards it? So the first thing I want to kind of go into fairly a little bit and be able to show you is our decisions on how we're showing the data. Now, Utah has data going back way past 2016, but the reason I've chose 2016 forward is because that's when, as a state, we started using the attributes. We started to see that points were being revisited, and we could see what was being treated, what was being eradicated, and then what new points are coming in. So it gives us a really good view, and we can track it across from year to year. So you can see we had 28,000 records in 2022 that were actually treated. And what we want to see is, we know that the red is going to continue. I mean, we hope it starts to go down like we're seeing from 2020 to 23. We want to see the yellow going up, and then we want to see a slight increase in our eradication. And it gives us a very good indicator of how well is public money being spent, whether it's through appropriations through the state, or whether we are utilizing federal money. We have the ability to show what's going on in the state. So when we're looking at the state as a legislator, they can come in, or the public or anyone, and start to look at the state of Utah as a whole and start to get a feel, like in this area, of what's being treated, areas that haven't been treated as much, where new points are coming in. You have the ability to, if this map isn't the map, I mean, we have added a lot of different base maps in here. You know, if topographic is better, or if you like to see imagery, you can change that. We've also incorporated we can turn off the weed points. So if you want to see where all the biocontrol in an integrated pest management system would be, the purples are every biocontrol release that from 16 forward. If you click on any of these, it's pulling the data live from EDDMapS. We know what it was. This was the weevil. If there's a picture attached, that picture will come in. That one didn't have it. Same thing with our monitoring. Our monitoring, we can actually click on each of these. These are permanent transects that we have across the state of Utah. Go back and turn this on. As a state weed coordinator, this gives me a view of what's being treated. And if I'm appropriating money, you know, through counties, CWMAs, private landowners, however that money's going out, I need to be able to see, because I have to report to an oversight committee and to legislators and to various different people that we were good stewards of public money. And so this gives me a really good option to be able to see it. Plus, I know this data has been verified, so it is accurate data. But I can also go in here and go, okay, I'm going to pick on Jerry because he's online. I can look at it from a state. I can zoom in and look at this as a county and see how an actual county is doing. And so I can look at this and go, okay, I know where a lot of projects were funded, where the state put a bunch of money here. So I would expect to see yellow and green, that there is a transition, that we are making a positive impact. I mean, to the point where you can zoom in, right down to the point level, and I'll just click on one. And it's the actual data that was put in, when it was put in, if it had been revisited. The reason there's 1 through 7, anytime this point has been revisited, we're capturing, EDDMapS is capturing that data, but we can actually see it. It's being promoted up through this site. It also gives me the ability to, if I want to go back to all counties, if I, as a weed coordinator, go, where in the state of Utah do I need to, put my efforts, who needs help? It gives me the ability, as I'm going through each of these counties, I can go look at Beaver County and go, obviously, I don't know. This tells me that a lot of data is being taken in Beaver. Is this that the weed supervisor needs to be trained? Is their county need some additional funds? Do they need training? But it really identifies to me where I need to put my efforts across the state of Utah in order to help with the invasive species. And I can also, if I go to, the nice thing is these numbers that are going across, move this up. The numbers that are going across the bottom change as let me move back to Tooele County. So when I go to Tooele County, I can see how many eradicated records just for Tooele County. I can see what's positive, what's been treated. I can then do an assessment on Tooele County to see how they're doing from 2016 up to 2023, and the info hasn't come in yet from 2023. It's just a great tool as to why. Really, we look at the EDDMapS data as our marketing arm. We are able to take this data, tell a good story, and be able to then appropriate additional funds, or at least ask for additional funds in the process. Same thing with the bio. For Tooele County, it looks like they only had one bio, but if we go back to the entire site, we can look at biocontrol for any of the species, how many have been put out. And if we can click on it and get additional information, go back out of this, and it'll show where that is on the map. So this is what I use as a state weed coordinator, and it's what the counties use. So when Jerry or Kevin is at their weed board meeting, they can very easily pull up their county, and we'll go into Box Elder. All of their data for their county is now updated in here, that they can go to their commissioner, and if there's a discussion on getting additional employees, seasonal help, new equipment, or whatever, they're able to show how successful they are in treating and how many acres have been treated. And they can not only show it with a visual, but they can back it up with the actual data from EDDMapS. So the next thing I want to show, I mean, this is the general information that you can get. All of this is the backbone of EDDMapS, and it's why you want to answer the why. Why do we collect points? Why do we spend so much time doing revisits? Because those revisits and collecting these points is really creating a very powerful story for invasive species going forward and being able to get funded for it. We also take it even further down, I guess I should say, as to if you want to get to the project level as to what actually is happening on the ground. So we've seen the county, you've seen the state level. We also provide to the public the what is happening for each year, what is being funded, and where is it being funded in the state of Utah. And this gives legislators or anyone a good distribution of where are public funds going by year or by multiple years. You can come in here and actually see what they look like. And again, these, you can zoom in, you can change your base map to get more information. But one of the real powerful tools that comes from this is being able to look at a project and really look at the point data from that project. So I can actually go look up a project for 2023. Let me pull one in. Good one. Right here. If I zoom in on this project, it's going to show me the project boundaries. It gives me all of the federal acres, private acres, state acres, who owns the property underneath this polygon, tells me what biocontrol is being released here and if there's any monitoring. So what I'm looking at and what a legislator or a federal agency is, what what type of project is this? Is this an IPM project? Does it have multiple elements to it? How much is being eradicated in here versus positive? Gives you a whole lot of information, and then you get a full description, tells you who it is, what species they were targeting, and then it also gives you the ability to read more on this. So what we've done is created story maps or storyboards of this that break out what's happening. We can include, YouTube videos. But what we want to do is push all of this information out to the public and use this as a marketing tool to show the work that's being done. And I know I'm scrolling fast, but I want to get to the end. So this shows you our monitoring based off of the point data, what we're seeing in the field. We also have, most of our monitoring is 3 or 4 years that we do. Oops, move that down. So we can actually show, and anyone can go to this website and see, are we being successful or not from this? You can also download this as a full report instead of a web viewer. But what it does is it is taking our information based off of EDDMapS data, and it's pushing it out, and it's pushing it forward to the public, to people who are providing money. And to give you an idea on the money, our program started, or in Utah, the invasive species program started with $1 million appropriated. That's now at 3 million appropriated. So we've been able to increase over the years, be able to take it from 1 to 2 to 3, 3 million, and then also to be able to encourage the federal partners to start putting money towards invasive species also. So this gives you an idea now at the project level, what you can actually do with the EDDMapS points. And you can zoom in and get all the information. If you want to come in and see what this looks like, and say you want to change the base map to more of just imagery and actually look at it. If you want to look at what was being monitored, you can look at the monitoring through here, when it was monitored, what they actually found, all the way to, point data is listed in here, and also the biocontrol. And so gives us a lot of information, gives us a lot of tools and the ability to read more and do download and push this information through our UW or our website, UDAF's website, and then this is promoted out through social media. The last one I want to show you is the other version, which is our federal. So that was all state money. As state money is coming in, that is appropriated, we show it in that one. We also have a federal one that we are pushing to our federal partners. And the reason we're doing this is the federal, we want to give them some additional information that is not in the state one. So the dashboard is a little bit different of how we're able to do this. But the federal, they want to know who the partners are and how much money is going to this project. Is it a 1-to-1 match? Is it a 2-to-1 match? There's additional information on the integrated pest management. They want to know if it's being inventoried. Let me pull this up. How much is herbicide versus inventoried versus monitored, revegetated, or protected? So we're able to capture that into this system. Again, we can show where every project is sitting, but it puts it in this over here, whether it's the U.S. Forest Service or BLM, tells how much money is being contributed. But there's a lot of other features in this dashboard that we want the forest or the federal partners to be able to use. If they're looking for something specific, they can come in and say, look, all I want to see is forest health projects. So they don't have to look at 80. It went from 128 down to 80. shows where those are. Or maybe they say, no, we just want to look at the BIL and it's down to 23 now projects. Or you can filter by biocontrol. How many of these had biocontrol? Only 17. How many of them were herbicide? Down to 9. It changes the dynamics and allows them to filter. But for the most part, it is really for Utah, Carol Randall, that's who the Forest Service is who our person. This is meant so that Carol can come out at any point and say, I need to do a report, what's happening in Utah, and be able to say, I want to see for this specific year, forest health projects, and then get all of the information that she needs to get. And in being able to provide it for her up front as live as things are happening, what we're hoping, and I think it'll play out, is that as future money comes, the federal agencies will know, look, we should really be looking at Utah because they provide the information that helps us do our job also. And so we want to get this information out to them. And the same thing in these ones, we have the ability to look at the point, see how much has been treated. You can either have a storyboard on some of them, or it just goes into a full download, report that you can do. That one is and then download it as a PDF. Let me go back to the Utah Hub. So those are the 3 areas of how we are utilizing it. We utilize the weed points specifically for the state weed coordinator, where I can look at what's happening across the counties, what's being tracked, and I can verify to the projects that I'm funding. We use the projects dashboard to show what's happening on the ground, and then the federal one to do the same thing. But the point is all of this we feel really comfortable with because we know that the data that is backing it up, so we can do the data, but if we're questioned like through a grandma request or through an oversight committee, I'm very confident that I can demonstrate this with the data, and that's verifiable data and that it is accurate. I think I'm getting close to, there's a few minutes left. I'm not going to go into all of the different the story maps that we have, but you've seen one of them. The garlic mustard one was but really this is the why. If I was to say, why do we do this? Because invasive species money is hard to get. There are a lot of people competing for it. Our best chance of doing well is to be able to show how good we are and what we're doing. And I'm telling you, EDDMapS data, there's a reason to collect it. There's a reason to use EDDMapS Pro, because this has given us a huge tool in our toolbox to be able to secure additional funding, I guess I would say. So any questions?
Thanks so much, Aaron. I think we are going to keep things moving. So if you have any questions for Aaron about the work that he's doing, this fantastic project, you can go ahead and add those in the Q&A. And Aaron, if you want to just take a look there for anything.
Yep.
And you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. We are going to go back to Chuck. So Chuck, whenever you're ready, you are good to go. All right, great.
Perfect. Thank you. And sorry y'all have to listen to me again, but I should have probably separated my presentation out a little bit. But so I wanted to give a quick update on the Wild Spotter project, something we've talked about a lot, and we've really made some big improvements to recently, as well as a project we did in Georgia last year called Juro Watch. And so I'm just going to kind of focus on these two things in this presentation, and then we will take a short break and get to the other presentations of the day. So Juro Watch was a project that came about because of this very showy spider that showed up in North Georgia a couple of years ago. And so after summer of the previous summer, and there being a lot of these showing up, we said, okay, this summer summer of 22, we're really going to take and do a organized effort to get the word out about this new species and get people excited about reporting it, so we can really document where it is found. Now, I'm going to preface this: Giro spiders are definitely exotic to the United States. We do not know enough about them yet to know if we would call it an invasive species, exactly what damage it's going to cause. And so, but that's part of the reason to collect data on it, so we'll know a little bit more about how it behaves. So we set up a Giro Watch website, integrated the EDDMapS reporting forms into it, made it very easy for somebody to report. Did a lot of social media graphics, showing where some of the holes were in reporting, to try to encourage people, hey, if you see it and you're in this county, report it. Did some educational materials showing kind of the difference between Giro spiders and other similar spiders. Without even doing any promotion of these posts, we were able to get a lot of organic reach to people, so a lot of awareness of this species, and it ended up being 67,000 individuals were reached. That means it just showed up on your feed, 3,600 clicks, 291 shares, a bunch of comments, and a bunch of likes. So something new public could get interested in. So we started looking over the period, and when we were doing the promotion, we saw a good spike at the beginning of promotion, which was also when the spiders were most out there, and a lot of good data coming in from that. We were able to really fill in the map, and what to me is the most important lesson we learned on this is, we got a lot of data. We got it from the website, we got it from the apps. Even got a couple of records from EDDMapS Pro coming in. We did pull data from our naturalists for that time period as well. In the contest, we had 203 reporters that reported in the contest, and that added 5 new counties. The most reports by individual reporter was 5, and the most counties by an individual reporter were 6. So we thought that was really cool. But what really makes me excited about this and makes me think that we can duplicate this as other things come along is we had over 1,000 unique reporters, and 1,085 of those, they were of only reported Giro spiders. So to our network of reporters, to our network of the first detectors, the people on the ground, another 1,000 people with this little campaign about this spider, we were able to add another 1,000 people that now know more about invasive species and know when they see something unusual, they should report it, and they know some ways to report it. So I would encourage anybody out there that works on a state or a local level to think about doing something like this. When there's something new, it's easy to identify and showy, or you're trying to fill in good data on something like Tree of Heaven because you're worried about spider lanternfly. There's some good lessons learned on this, and there's other examples as well, but this was kind of a unique one that I wanted to show. We made available digital badges, as well as we mailed some stickers out to the winners as well. So just a little bit of incentive on top of that. All right, so I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about Wild Spotter. Wild Spotter is an effort that started about 5 years ago as a effort to really map invasive species on public lands. And so this was a partnership with the Forest Service and Wildlife Forever initially, to really focus on how do we get people in the national forest reporting species and build a framework around that. On on top of EDDMapS. So not a new database, but something really geared toward outdoor recreation and public lands. And so those were our real goals. Let's make it easy. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. We started out with a website. We tried to make it as clean and as visually appealing as possible, and really have it as the hub of information. We built it all on the EDDMapS platform. This is the question I get asked the most, but WildSpotter is going to the same database as EDDMapS. It was just uniquely designed for this purpose. I even refer to it a lot for people that know what EDDMapS is this is EDDMapS Lite. We've got EDDMapS Pro. This is EDDMapS Lite. So again, it's all part of EDDMapS. It's just another way to get the data in. It's using the same verification network and everything else. We've done a lot of marketing and promotion in the early stages, and we're continuing that with some print advertisements, and then really thinking about how do we incentivize volunteers to get started. So we've created some starter kits, doing things like certificates, some pin stickers, those kind of things, and really trying to work with local areas to implement this program. So when we started this, it was focused on a pilot group of national forest and really focused on wilderness areas. As COVID went along and we were not able to do as much outreach on this as we liked, we said, okay, we're going to keep building this. We're going to keep expanding this. And so we've now added every national forest and every grassland into WildSpotter. We are working on adding all of the Bureau of Land Management's national conservation lands and hope to have those in the next couple of weeks. We've also done some pilots with the pilot projects with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as a couple of tribes in Minnesota, as just kind of trying things out, getting things added. We added the Boise foothills. And so this was the, kind of the pilot. Well, now we have said, okay, we need to keep building this. This is a way that we can get consensus among public lands for reporting. So we said, let's make it easy. Let's make it where a state agency can send us a spreadsheet of their state parks or their state forest with a little bit of information, and we're able to upload it and automatically add those wild spaces. So there's my the email address. If you're interested in that and you work with a state agency and you want your areas represented, then please reach out to us and we'll be glad to work with you on that. For the national forest and something we're looking at for other areas later, we've added offline maps to make it very easy for you to see where you are when you don't have cellular coverage in some of these areas. And so it's really a tool to help assist in that functionality in those remote areas. The app has been designed to be as simple and as easy to use as possible. And I really want to stress that, because we really want to focus on a crowd that what we're focused on is getting them interested in the invasive species issue, and here's something they can do about it and make it as simple as possible. So we've done things like integrate a user guide directly into the app. We've changed up recently where when you're reporting a plant infestation, we're not worried about exactly how many square feet or how many acres of the infestation is. Hey, are you standing there? Is it the size of a basketball? Is it the size of a small car? Is it the size of a school bus? If it's bigger than a school bus, then it's still at least the size of a school bus. And it gives the managers in those public lands a way to know how big the problem is, and it doesn't require the user to really go in and know exactly how, do a measurement or anything else like you would do, like somebody will probably do later if it is something to worry about. We've also added the feature where users can create their own wild place directly in the app. So if you're working in an area and you want to create your wild place and start reporting in that wild place, then you can draw it out in the app. You can upload an image. representing your wild place. You can even search for species and add species list, all of that directly in the app. And then it will become a wild place. Now, these are user level wild places. So they start out and they're only available for the user that created them. But there's a process that we're working through where if you want to promote your local wild place into a official wild place, then you can do that as well if you've got a group working in that area. And some other things we've added to the apps are things like auto upload. We've added achievement badges into it, ability to report directly from the map view, a setting to automatically upload so you don't have to remember to go into your queue and upload it, and really trying to personalize the interface. Here are some of the badges that we started with. You get a badge when you make your first report. You get a badge when you make your first bird report or first tree report. And then it kind of does a counter of how many reports you have in each area after that. Another thing that we thought about is how do we get users to download this app and use it? And so one of the things we also added is a national checklist. So there's plenty of apps out there that allow you to keep track with what national parks you visited. But there's not an option out there to keep track of what national forests you visited, or what BLM lands you visited, or what state parks in Georgia have you visited. And so a lot of people like to keep up with that list. So we've integrated that in. It's available for the national forest and national grasslands now. And as we add other new wild places like the BLM lands, then those will be available through the checklist format as well. And you can do that both on the website and through the app. We're also looking at ways to build community around this, with the leaderboard concept, how many observations by user, what are the most observed species, what are the wild places with the most reports. Again, a lot of short YouTube videos to really help with the training part and make it very simple for you to go, hey, what do you want to do before you go to the wild place? How do you navigate the app? How are reports validated? How do you quantify an infestation? We've also worked with the Pilot National Forest to build different trailhead posters and templates for those posters. These concepts are something that can be put up, that can be laminated. One of the ones we just recently did was this one that we're sending out to the Superior National Forest, I think, so they can add those and put them out around their forest. And we're looking at ways to integrate the Wild Spotter campaign into things like boot brush stations and other materials like that come out through Play Clean Go. We've had about 2,200 downloads to the app and about 48,000 page views to the website from about 16,000 web users. Obviously Wild Spotter has not been around as long as EDDMapS, and we're still growing that user base through different ways of outreach. We have a decent Facebook following of about 3,500 users, and as the summer picks up, we're going to be posting things to the Facebook page to help continue to engage people into the Wild Spotter program. There's also we're working with backcountry hunters and anglers, and there's going to be a social media campaign this spring through to their membership, really encouraging them to download the app and start exploring what it can do. We're not talking about it directly today, but there is an effort going on for the national EDR framework. And we get a lot of questions about that, comparing that to programs like Wild Spotter. And what I will say is this is one of their graphics, and they have existing data sources and data collection tools. And that's where EDDMapS and Wild Spotter fit into this. And the University of Georgia and the Forest Service is partnering with USGS and Department of Interior to make sure that Wild Spotter is part of this national EDR framework. I mentioned iNaturalist in terms of of aggregating data earlier, but it's the same kind of concepts when you compare iNaturalist to WildSpotter. WildSpotter has expert verification. You're able to do more advanced data collection. You don't worry about things like the limitation of the fields and the data obscurity things that are not an issue for data in our public lands. We've built a lot of partners around WildSpotter and are continuing to reach out to them to help us promote this and help us add new wild places to it. We've also worked with all the major prevention partnerships, as well as a new effort called Invasives Free USA. The Invasives Free USA and the WildSpotter program are working together on a training course that is going to be this December in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I want to invite all of y'all to attend this. It is going to be really focused on how you do an on-the-ground invasive species program and how you manage volunteers, how you reach out to local partners, and we've invited a whole slew of experts, both that are doing this kind of work on the ground, as well as experts from other fields who are going to come in and help teach us some of the things that we as an invasive species community don't think about always when we're doing outreach and making connections. So if you want more information on this, you can go to invasivesfree.org. There's a sign up form on there where you can sign up to get more information, and the full agenda as well as the registration for this is going to be available very soon. It is going to not be concurrent sessions. It's going to be one session, and we're going to limit the number of attendees just so we have a good group. And then if this is successful, we're going to move it to other parts of the country in other years. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll answer them in the chat. And then, please check out wildspotter.org as well as invasivesfree.org. And I think now we have a break.
All right, will do.
All right, we have about 5 more presentations coming for you this afternoon. Next up, we're going to hear from Janine Neske from the USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. Janine is a biologist and extension specialist who works on the National Feral Swine Damage Management Program. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science, as well as a Master of Agricultural Sciences and Extension Education. All right, it's 3 o'clock, so you are good to go.
Okay. Look good, everybody?
Looks good.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about Squeal on Pigs, which is a public reporting campaign that we have. It's still in the works, so we don't have a whole lot of results to share just yet, but we are about to kick this thing off, so we're pretty excited about it. So first, just a little background. I know this group there's been a lot of plants and insect talk, but feral swine are an introduced and invasive mammal, which they have the extra complicating factor of human-assisted translocation. Basically, people want to move them for more convenient hunting opportunities. So we have people moving feral swine around, and we have genetic evidence to show that. And they're highly adaptable. So when someone does move them, they almost always can establish a population wherever they have been released. They're omnivores, they're intelligent, they have really high fecundity rates. Basically one of the ultimate invasive species. They actually cause about 2.5 billion in damage to agricultural resources annually. And this is not fully taking into account all the damage they can cause, because we have yet to be able to fully assess and measure damage to natural resources and other hard to measure types of damage. Just going to run through some slides just to show you the true extent of damage that this critter can do. This is a cornfield. One sounder of pigs within a few hours could take down acres worth of corn. This is an interesting example of damage to an ecosystem. So this is out in the Ozarks in Missouri. Way out there, where they know that there is a very endangered species of orchid, and the pigs were rooting it up. And the only way they could prevent the pigs from getting after these orchids was to haul electric fence equipment out there and run hot wire around these orchids. So a lot of manpower, a lot of time and effort put into stopping feral pig damage here. Another common way feral pigs will damage wildlife and ecosystems is by just straight out eating young or eggs. They really will get after. This is a pig getting into a sea turtle nest. Despite, you can see there's hot wire around it, and do I have a pointer? Hang on. Laser pointer. You see a little bit of a hot wire, and there's a cage over it, and our pig has still gotten in there. And we've seen total decimation of sea turtle nesting populations in areas with feral swine. They'll also get after ground nesting birds' eggs. And let's see, this is damage to a golf course. So again, another type of damage that's not fully assessed necessarily is property damage, just damage to landscaping, damage to people's yards, parks, etc. Even cemeteries. This was a very high concern, is disease risk and transmission to livestock, because feral pigs will often intermingle with cattle and other livestock, and they can carry a lot of zoonotic disease. And that disease risk is applicable to humans too. So these are some pigs on a playground in Puerto Rico. Never mind the fact that an angry mama sow could cause some real damage if she decided to go after a person or a child, but their droppings are all over the park, and therefore there is a disease risk. So in general, just a little background here. Sorry, I'm gonna get caught up here on a minute, get to the exciting stuff. But so what's being done about feral pigs? Back in 2014, Congress first allocated funds for our program, and we've had funds allocated annually ever since. And our main approach is to provide guidance and support from a national level to collaborate with local stakeholders to manage feral swine feral swine damage in their region, because it's very regional, depending on not just your geography, but also like the laws and the public sentiment toward feral swine in your region. So here's a map to give a little ground on what has happened with feral swine. So the blue down here, sorry, it's so small, this is 1982 feral swine populations in blue. And then by 2015, they had just exploded north. And this is primarily due to people moving them. Yes, there's some natural migration, but these populations way up north are coming from people putting them in a truck in Louisiana and driving them out. Here's our populations last year, 2022. We've managed to get some of those remote populations back down, like no more in Washington. Actually, this population in Oregon is looking like it should be eliminated this year. The one in Vermont, New Hampshire is much smaller. So we're gaining some ground as far as removing feral swine, at least the smaller isolated populations, although they're still well established in the South. But it's not just an America or US problem, it's all of North America, because we see right across the northern border in Canada, we have substantial feral swine populations. Likewise, there's feral swine populations in Mexico along the border as well. So we really need to collaborate as a transboundary effort to address feral swine. And sorry for this very boring slide. This is just a shout out to the Feral Swine Transboundary Working Group, which was established in 2020. This group is really what spearheaded our Squeal on Pigs effort and the reporting campaign. And primarily, our Washington Invasive Species Council was one of our primary partners for this, because they had actually originally established that back in about 2019 or 2012. I'm sorry, they had established the Squeal on Pigs as a kind of a brand. So what is this squeal on pigs I keep talking about? Oops, laser here. It is a transboundary partnership to prevent introduction and spread of feral swine. How exactly are we trying to do that? Primarily through outreach, education, and this public reporting campaign. By creating standardized messaging, and we'll be able to communicate to the public, and we'll also be able to develop some customized key messages for distinct audiences. For example, farmers are going to have some very different interests than bird watchers or other recreationists, but feral swine can still impact a wide variety of user groups. We're also working to create a toolkit that managers can use to take the Squeal on Pigs outreach campaign and insert it into their local management efforts. And this is primarily targeting regions with smaller and less established feral swine populations because it's kind of a preventative effort. Let's find the small populations before they get really bad or big or well established. But that's not to say that it won't be useful in states with more feral swine or more established populations. Haha. So here is our Squeal on Pigs. This is the more fun part now. So there was a branding refresh recently. So the one on the left, this guy, was the original Squeal on Pigs, established in around 2012 by Washington Invasive Species Council, as well as a few other partners in the Pacific Northwest. And I have been using that branding and reporting primarily through just a hotline number with success in the Pacific Northwest. It's spread into Canada as well. But we rebranded it to give it a little more pow, a little more edge, make it a little more eye-catching. Here's just a few more examples of some of our fun graphics. We have pigs causing various types of damage, mostly rooting, but in wetland and in grasslands. And we also made some space to create some pretty fun graphics that allow for more in-depth messaging. So we have, this is an example, so it's still in Latin over here, but we can customize the language on the side to really target certain types of damage and certain user groups that would be impacted by the types of damage. So this one we used to have, the stories being told in the image with the pathogens and the sick and dead cow, but we can also explain off on the side how feral swine poses disease risks to livestock. Similar over here, we have a wetland, a duck flying off. We also have, look at these little eggs that pig's heading right for. Additionally, we've got this translated now into multiple languages because, again, we have to work across all of North America. So right now we have everything translated into Spanish as well as French. So we can move east, take this east to the northeast and into Quebec, French-speaking Canada, as well as down south and into Mexico. So some of the features of this campaign is a plethora of outreach templates. So we are going to be providing templates for use for local managers, whether they're state, federal, extension, whomever. They can download and utilize these templates for all sorts of things, everything from stickers to hats to brochures, etc. Along with all those templates, there's going to be some brand guidance, and that's just to help make sure that although we're spreading it wide and we want everyone to just pick it up and use it and integrate it into their programs, we still want to make sure that there's consistency. So we'll have some brand guidance to go along with it. Also in the works, we are going to establish a website that will work as, it'll allow for reporting on the web, but it will also be a bit of a directory to someone who remembers Squeal on Pigs because it's catchy, can go Google that, find the site, and then be redirected to whatever applicable local for their state, province management group would be. And a mobile app, which is, guess what, powered by EDDMapS. That's why we're all here. So we're really excited to get this up and running. And we have some states that are ready to start piloting it, and now that we have the rebranding, we're going to try to get it rolled out here and see how it works in real life. So when you first open the app, you'll get to go scroll through a couple of little educational slides that'll just briefly summarize some of the types of damage from feral swine. So we get a little bit of education in there before we get people into the app. Then they can go ahead and report their sighting. Or they can hit learn more. Learn more will bring you on to a bit of a directory to read up on other aspects of feral swine damage, find photos, find identification tips, things like that. But you can also still land right back on reporting a sighting. So the benefits of having a public reporting for feral swine is that we can quickly identify introductions, which can allow for quick removal. So if somebody sees somebody unloading a trailer of pigs off on the national forest in Idaho, where we don't have feral swine, we want to know about that so we can get there quickly and get them out of there before they get off into the woods and go ahead and establish a population. And this product can also be adaptable to be applied to a rapid response in the case of any foreign animal disease introduction. So ASF, or African swine fever, has been a bit of a concern lately because it was found in the Caribbean and it's never been in North America, but we don't want that here. It would decimate our trade. It would really damage our domestic pork production. So if there were ever a case and we needed to be able to isolate and locate sick feral swine, this app could be utilized for that. Mostly though, it gives the public a call to action surrounding feral swine. As it stands right now, we haven't really had much of one. You know, they cause damage, they're bad, we don't want them. But giving the public something they can do about it, I think, can really help drive that message home and make people remember it. And increasing that accountability is a really important part because, like I said, a lot of times it's people moving them. So if the public has accountability and interest in the problem, they're more likely to talk their buddy out of going down to Texas to get some feral hogs to bring back to Nebraska just because they think it'd be fun to hunt them. So that is that's really it. I mean, this was quick. I saved a couple minutes here for some questions from anybody else here, but that is Squeal on Pigs in a nutshell, and keep an eye out for it. I think we will have a lot more happening around this in the next few months. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Janine. I think we will go ahead and we will keep moving here, take advantage of that time. So Annette, if you are ready to go, if you want to pull your slides up, and if anybody has any more questions on Squeal on Pigs, you can go and put those in the Q&A and Janine will take a look at those.
Sure, just give me a second.
Yeah, of course. So next we're going to hear from Dr. Annette Evans. Annette is an ORISE postdoctoral fellow at the USGS Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center and the University of Massachusetts. Her work focuses on the effects of climate change on the risk posed by invasive species across the United States. She's currently working on synthesizing management priorities identified by land managers across the US as part of the Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change, or RISC, management networks. Annette is particularly interested in the eco-evolutionary cascades caused by the introduction or removal of invasive species from native communities. All right, everything looks good, Annette, so you are good to go.
Brilliant, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon to talk through one of the new tools that's been added to EDDMapS recently that some of you might have noticed, and to give you a little bit of background to where this tool came from. So this tool is called the Future Abundance Habitat tool, and it's based on some recent abundance models that I've been working on as part of my postdoc. And so for those of you that use EDDMapS quite frequently, it's located under this distribution maps tab. And so you'll notice that there are a handful of species where this new abundance habitat, future abundance habitat tab has been added. And so this is what I'm going to sort of dig into a little bit later on in the talk. But just to start off with, I want to give you some background into how we developed this tool and the data that went into that. So this tool builds on other EDDMapS tools that can be used for proactive management of invasive species when we're thinking about how climate change is likely to be impacting those invasive species. And I'm sure many of you are aware one of the ways that climate can impact invasive species is by species shifting their ranges. And it's these range shifting taxa that this tool is particularly targeted towards. And the view is that if we're able to identify which species are likely to be moving their ranges and where they're likely to be moving to, we can target those particular taxa to either prevent those species establishing in new areas in the first place, or if they are already there, we can seek to eradicate them early on before they reach higher, much larger populations. And so previous work by Jenica Allen and Bethany Bradley is targeted and sort of worked towards this prioritization framework that's already incorporated into EDDMapS. So everything I'm talking about today is all about invasive plants. So we're back in the world of plants. And so in 2016, Jenica and Bethany went and collected data on 869 invasive plants by pulling data sets from online data sources like EDDMapS. And for those nearly 900 species, they ran species distribution models using 13 different climate model scenarios. And the output of that work was to create species distribution models for these invasive plant taxa and to create occurrence maps of where these species are likely to be in the future. And it's this data that's already been incorporated into EDDMapS through a tool called the Invasive Range Expanders Listing tool. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. But one of the other important outcomes from Jenica's work was if you compile all of those output maps for those nearly 900 species that they worked through, you can stack them on top of each other to look for hotspots, so regions that are likely to support a large number of invasive species in the future. And so on the screen, I'm showing you one of those resulting maps that shows you those hotspot regions just for the north and northeastern United States. So the darker the red color, the higher the number of invasive plants that are likely to be able to establish populations in these regions with climate change. And you can see that there are some places on this map where up to 100 new invasive plants are likely to establish in climate change. And so while it's really helpful to have this list of 100 potential plants for these regions, that's a lot of species. And a lot of these species will be needing to be managed on top of species that are already there. And so this kind of led our group to ask, well, is there a way we can prioritize species even further than just identifying which are the ones that are likely to be shifting their ranges? And so one way that we could narrow down this list is to not just look at where a species could occur on the landscape, but also look at whether they can reach high abundance. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So one, there's not a perfect overlap in terms of habitat of where a species can occur versus where they can become abundant. So on the screen, you can see two maps for two different invasive species that show you the overlap in this occurrence versus abundance range. So the yellow areas of the map are simply where a species can occur, but not reach high abundance, or at least we haven't recorded high abundant populations. Whereas those sort of darker blue colors are where a species can not only just occur, but also reach high abundance. And so you can see that that range of where they both overlap in occurrence and abundance is much narrower. So this is one way that we could try to narrow down that prioritization list. The second reason we might be interested in looking at where species could become abundant is because high abundance is also often correlated with higher impact. And for those of you that are out in the field managing, I'm sure you can also reconcile the fact that, in removing one individual or a handful of individuals from a landscape is much easier than trying to eradicate an enormous large population. And so for those reasons, we were looking at, figuring out, okay, well, which species are likely to become abundant with climate change and where are they likely to be shifting their ranges, and how are those ranges likely to be shifting? So to do that, we gathered abundance data, which whenever I talk about abundance here, I'm talking about some kind of metric of percent cover. And we used a cutoff of 5% to determine if a species was abundant or not. And so we gathered abundance data from 18 different online databases, including EDDMapS. And after going through a variety of data curation processes, we selected 144 species that are already established in the United States and have an East Coast distribution, because that was sort of our starting point for this research. And so for each of those 144 species, we did species distribution modeling, and we used a current suite of climate variables to estimate, what's our sort of status quo, where are species distributed currently, and then used a future climate scenario of 2 degrees of warming, which we expected to reach around 2100. And so we did all this modeling with some colleagues at the USGS using software called VizTrails. And I'm not going to get into the details of that modeling, but I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested offline. But I will just jump straight into those results. So what we did is for each of those 144 species, we stacked the output maps on top of each other to look at abundance hotspots. So where are areas on the landscape that can support a large number of species that can reach high abundance? And so again, on this map, the darker the red color, the greater the number of species that can reach high abundance. And there's sort of 3 general regions in the eastern United States where we see these hotspots. So one's down northeastern coast of Florida and Georgia, and then the rest are just broadly distributed in the northeastern United States, in the Great Lakes region and Mid-Atlantic region. And all of these places can support abundant populations of over 40 invasive plant species. And so this is kind of our status quo situation. And so now we're interested to compare how climate change is likely to shift these hotspot locations. And so now this new map that I've just propagated here on the right shows you that with 2 degrees of climate change, the ranges of abundance habitat for these species are likely to be shifting northward, which I'm sure many of you are not surprised to hear, but also predominantly shifting towards the northeast, followed by the northwest. And so you can see that we still have quite a few regions where up to more than 40 species of invasive plant are able to reach high abundance. And now these are much more concentrated towards the New England region. In addition to this sort of broad overview, we can also dig in a little bit more on individual species and regional based trends. And so at a 4x4 kilometer scale, which was the scale of our study, we see evidence of regions maintaining invaders. So on average, if you look at this middle figure, 18 species that currently have abundance habitat in a particular region are likely to still be able to have abundant populations in the future. But interestingly, we also saw shifts in that species composition. So on average, a region is expected to gain 4 brand new invasive plant species, so species that can't currently sustain abundant populations, but will be able to in the future. And conversely, on average, regions are likely to lose up to 5, on average, 5 species. So there is evidence that climate change is likely to cause some invasive plants to struggle to maintain abundant populations. And that's kind of exciting in terms of a restoration approach, that maybe we can be redirecting some conservation money away from species that are losing habitat. And as I mentioned, we also have this breakdown based on individual taxa. So I mentioned that we've run these models for 144 species. And for each of those species, we've got output maps, kind of like I'm showing you here. So these are just 2 examples of 2 different species that show very different trends in terms of their responses to future climate change. So on the left, I've got wine raspberry, and wine raspberry is expected to experience an overall expansion of its abundance range. So in both these figures, the blue areas of the map are areas where the species currently is able to sustain abundant populations. But with climate change, our models suggest that that region is likely to become unsuitable. Whereas purple areas, the species are currently observed in high abundance and are likely to be able to persist into the future. And red areas are areas where species currently struggle to maintain high abundance or are not being reported in high abundance. And that area is likely to become suitable with climate change. And so you can see for wine raspberry, although there's quite a large area out west where we see this decrease in suitability. We see quite a large area of the species current range in purple is being maintained and a large area is being gained. And then you kind of see the flip side for alligator weed, where quite a large extent of the current range is predicted to be unsuitable for abundant populations into the future. And so this kind of brings me into this new range expanders listing tool feature that we've been creating based on the output from the models that I've just shared with you. And so before I dig into what's new, I want to do a very brief overview of what's currently there. And so for those who are unaware, this invasive range expanders listing tool, which is a real mouthful to say, is located under this tools and training bar and under this database tools. And this again was developed originally based on the model results of the species models run by Jenica Allen. So those models were based purely on occurrence data. So was the species observed there? Yes, no. So when you click on the range expander tool, you get taken to a page that looks something like this. And so on this page, you can select what state you're focusing your work in. If there's a particular county that you're interested in looking at, or all counties, you can refine the list based on the degree of area. Do you just want to see what species are in that state, or are you more interested in a regional approach? And then the last drop-down menu that you see on the screen is choose number of models. And so just like our study, Jenica ran a variety of different models, and I think it was 13 different climate models. And so the higher the number of models, the greater the agreement in terms of the output values that region is likely to be suitable for that species. So if you choose 13, it means 13 out of 13 models say, yeah, that region is likely to be able to support that particular species. And so as you toggle through these different drop-down menus, you can see a map propagating down here on the lower left that shows you the region that the data is being pulled from, and then a list of species, kind of like a watch list, is dynamically updates for you. And this kind of gives you a list of species that are likely to occur in that particular region or area that you've outlined with climate change. And so in addition to this very broad overview, you could click on one of these individual taxa and you could be taken to a taxa-specific page. And so in addition to information about the species itself in the records, you can see if you click on this counties button, you've got a variety of drop-down options. And the two based on Jenica's work are this future range, which I'm actually not going to show you today, and this future certainty. And so the future certainty shows you the breakdown in terms of model agreement. So how many models agree that that particular county in this stage is suitable for that particular species to occur. So again, the darker the green colors, the more models agree that that species is likely to occur there with climate change. And it's this future certainty map that we've now duplicated based on the abundance data. So this example on the screen I'm showing you is Japanese knotweed. And so here are all the different counties in the sort of geographic location where Japanese knotweed is likely to be able to occur with climate change. Oh yeah, now if you click on this future abundance habitat map, this is what that equivalent looks like for the abundance data. So again, we're still on Japanese knotweed. And again, still the darker the green color, the higher the number of models, and in this case, it's 15 models, agree that that region or that county is likely to be able to support abundant populations given climate change. And so the hope is that, if you're, looking to try to narrow down that list of species that you're either monitoring for or trying to manage in your particular state or county, you can not only look at if that species is likely to be able to occur there in the future, but also whether it's likely to maintain abundant populations. And so currently these maps are available for you to use on EDDMapS for 144 different species. And we do have a West Coast companion paper that we're developing. So most of the species, or in fact, all of those 144 species, have at least some abundance record east of around the middle of Texas line. And so now we've run the same models based on West Coast taxa. So for all of you that are working out west, that data, we're currently working on getting it uploaded to EDDMapS. And so you should have that available for an additional, 120 to 150 taxa. The results for both the East and West are currently being written up. And so there will be a manuscript coming out. So keep an eye out if you want to learn a little bit more about the methods that went into sort of all the background analysis that generated these maps. And so with that, I just want to thank first all my co-authors, as well as everybody else who made all this work possible, and our funding sources. And if I have time, I'll take questions. Otherwise, I will be here until the end. So happy to wait as well.
Thanks, Annette. That was fantastic. It looks like we already have a question here. Are there any cons of choosing to use multiple models? Are the models ranked somehow so that if you choose to use one, it picks a certain one for a reason?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have in the tool, it doesn't tell you which model has suggested that this is a suitable region or a not suitable region. It depends on how conservative you want to be with your estimates. So if only one model out of 15 suggests that a particular region is likely to support an abundant population, it seems like there's quite a lot of error in there and a much greater level of uncertainty than if all 15 models say, yeah, this region is likely to be able to support abundant populations. So my advice would be, skew towards the higher agreement, but just know, if you want the most conservative list of species or estimate of that future abundance range, the higher the number of models, the more conservative that estimate.
All right, awesome. We had one more question come in. Are you using EDDMapS data to validate or ground truth your models as time goes on?
Oh, that'd be great. There is no current plan to do that, in part because I'm on a short-term contract. But yeah, that'd be really cool in the future, though. I'm sure that will happen. There was some model validation and checking during the model development process, but that was sort of, here's our pool of data, and you develop your models on a subset of that data and then test it on the part that you didn't use to develop the models, not sort of based on real world application. But yeah, that'd be great going forward. But yeah, no current plans at the moment.
All right, sounds good. Well, if anybody else has any more questions for Annette, feel free to add those in the Q&A, but I think we'll keep moving here. We'll build on this momentum. So Joe, if you're ready, you can pull up your slides. Next, we're going to hear from Joe LaForest. Joe is the Associate Director for the University of Georgia's Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. He provides technology to enable more effective use of information. He leads system development on center applications for the delivery of images, videos, presentations, occurrence data, maps, and other user-created content. He also serves as co-director for the Southern IPM Center and facilitates partnerships to leverage the capabilities of disparate data systems and maximize the benefit to all stakeholders. Prior to joining UGA in 2006, he received his bachelor's in urban forestry and dual master's in entomology and plant pathology from The Ohio State University. All right, Joe, if you're ready, you can take things away.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, NASMA, for helping to put this summit together and host this. It's been really good to see the questions and the interaction going on. I get to have the fun of talking of something that's a little on the edge of what a lot of people get to think about. And it's integrating diagnostic labs into EDDMapS. EDDMapS continues to evolve from sitting around looking at where we were when the system first launched. We got out a minimal value product that could get something done and help inform people. And every year we sit down with folks using the systems and say, all right, what else does this need to do? How can this make your life easier? How do we actually put technology to use to help you, as opposed to be one more thing you have to do and one more report you have to get out? And so the notion of diagnostic labs and bringing them into the verification flow has been around for a while. Main reason for it is there's limits to what you can do verifying reports in any system. That if I get a report of, in this case, rosette disease, or a report of tar spot of corn here, I'm not necessarily going to look at the picture and that looks like the symptoms, but is there virus in that plant? Without an actual test, I'm not necessarily willing to double down on that. For something like this, I see a nice palmer amaranth in front of a field and I'm only seeing one, and that's a really clean field. Is that resistant? From just looking at it, it would be very hard for us to be able to tell. And when we're talking about something like tar spotted corn, I mean, you could barely even see these little structures on the leaf surface, and to actually confirm, you're going down and looking at this under a microscope. It's not something a lot of field personnel are equipped for. It's something that we don't really have good field assays to go out and do this in the field with an ELISA. And even if you did have it, how good is the reliability of that test? So it starts coming into, there are folks that do this. How do we connect with them? How do I go to the extra step where I can't just look at it? I need to go for further testing. So we started this thing up that I wanted to be able to drop a point on a map. And we have this for verifiers already. I drop a point on the map, I select the species, it tells me who will get that report. We use that tool. It's on the tools and training point page, or it's on the tools page on EDDMapS, to verify what we know the logic of the system's doing. We wanted the same thing for diagnostic labs. So if there is a lab willing to test for a certain thing, here, this tells me exactly who would be willing to serve that. Getting buy-in from the different diagnostic labs, whether we're at a land-grant university and associated with the National Plant Diagnostic Network, private testing labs, gets to be a bit of a challenge because they already have their own existing workflows and other ways they're doing things. It gets to be even more of a challenge when we're talking about research labs, but we could at least start saying this might, through what EDDMapS is doing for trying to provide some of this early detection and rapid response, provide a stream of samples coming in and might be something to look for. So this does exist for a small number of pathogens where we have testing labs available. You drop a point and it tells you not only what lab is willing to provide that test, but also what protocol they would actually run. From the lab side, some of them still aren't in the place where they actually have a system for version control, which is an exciting topic, let me tell you, for their protocols. So that if I tested a sample in 2020 and I move up to 2023, is it the same exact protocol? Did they change what buffers they were using or reagents or their suppliers? What were they doing? So for the diagnostic labs, we said, look, here's a way that you can actually put your protocols in here, because we're going to need to know some of that information if we're going to get you a good sample. Here's your protocol in here. Here's how you can maintain what's going on in your lab. And we went a step further and said, let's actually open this up between labs. So for the labs participating, they can see what protocols other labs have shared publicly. By doing that, they can actually say, oh, they've got a really nice extraction technique. I'd love to use it. Let me go ahead and bring that into my lab and continue to use the protocol they have. And the system's smart enough to go, if that other lab I'm using their protocol for ever changes their protocol, notify me about that. I'd like to know when this protocol is updated because there's something better. So it starts providing this function and this community around diagnostic labs and folks that are providing this testing to support what is the best method to be using. This is all tying into that. I now have my cadre of labs that are in the system. They're sharing protocols. I know where they can provide testing for it. And with that, we get to the point of interacting with the people who actually made the original report. We wanted it that if somebody says, I would like to request a sample to be sent for this because the picture looks good, it could be Rose Rosette, I want a sample. We send out to the person that made the report the sampling instructions. You need to go get a gallon-size Ziploc bag. You need to go fill that with symptomatic shoots, and it tells you step by step, here's how you get me a good sample. Here's your packing slip. Just put that straight into the envelope or the box with everything else. And here's the shipping label. So how can we handle a bunch of the logistics of getting the sample to go out to that lab? We then took it a little step further and said, there's going to be some communication going on here. And as much as everyone loves having one more email in their inbox, sometimes they're necessary. So between the reporter, a verifier, and the lab, we have where the report initially comes in and the verifier says, hey, can you send me a sample of that? When the reporter sends a sample, it lets the lab and the verifier know the sample was received. That goes back to the reporter. When results are told, that goes back to the verifier. And then for verification and follow-up, the verifier now has that additional data to talk with the reporter and say, all right, turns out you do have Rose Rosette. Here's what we'd recommend you doing from this point forward. It helps close that loop so everything's documented as terms of that a sample was actually sent, it was received by the lab, and what's going on with each of these. Where I get all kinds of thrilled is the enhanced data that we then can provide in EDDMapS. You've all seen the EDDMapS pages where we have reports. This is for a particular report of Rose Rosette disease. Here's all the usual report information you get, plus the pictures of the report at that time. I scroll down a little further on the page. Oh, I have lab results. So here's the idea of the protocol that was used because we're in version control. Here's the title. Here's the lab that performed this test. And here's actually the procedure that they followed in doing this test. It actually goes further into if you're a molecular genetics person, here's actually the protocol they were following. Because in this case, they are okay with this protocol being publicly available. There's nothing confidential here. It's helping advance the discussion about proper diagnostics and good methodology. And at the very end of all this, it was a positive result. And here's the comments, including the CT values from the real-time PCR they ran. So if there's ever a question in the future of, all right, you have this report of Rose Rosette disease, are you sure? Well, yes, we are. It wasn't just based on symptomology. Here's all the data. Here's the entire chain of what happened and the result we had. Where I'm really, really excited about this is what we can do with this in the future. This is looking at the Rose Rosette data we currently have in the system. And it's saying whether or not the lighter blue colors where it's expertise, somebody went, oh yeah, there's Rose Rosette in that county. We gathered all the commonly held knowledge from the experts, and that's what's currently in that map. Versus I looked at a photo and yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Rose Rosette. To no, I actually got a specimen. I looked at it and I can't see virus particles, but it had the mite on it that helps carry this virus around. It's a pretty good bet that was Rose Rosette. To finally diagnostic lab testing. So if I wanted to structure a survey to follow up on any of the known infestations, I have locations I could go back to and look at this. We could even go a step further with that and say with that lab testing, if it turns out those primers that were used for that PCR, those molecular tests to identify that this was this pathogen, turns out they cross-reacted. And we now have a better extraction routine. We have better primers. We have better technology to get a better result. I can pull all that data, look at it, and we can select up a sampling routine. We can say, all right, we want to go resample these locations. We know exact places. In some cases, the plants may still be there. How do we follow up? And taking this for diseases, for resistance, for anything you need that additional follow-up, it's just taking it a step further for what you can do when you know how something was actually confirmed in the field. We are starting to expand beyond this now. We've had this up and working. We're getting some additional pathogens, additional resistance targets into the system for verifying, and people are running their early detection and rapid response programs using EDDMapS to do this. what we've started looking at this now is, well, I've got protocols, I've got lab addresses, and I know the interests of different folks and what they're looking at. Could we start doing some things with post verification integration? That, all right, I've just told you that you have Brazilian pepper. Well, do you know there's a Brazilian pepper biocontrol program? They're actually rearing the agents and they will ship it to you. They'd like you to tell you when they released it, and they'd like you to do some follow-ups, maybe it's 6 months and a year, to know how those populations are doing. But if you're already engaged with them, why wouldn't you provide that for the sample or the biocontrol agents they're helping you release? There's plenty of research programs across the United States trying to look at the genetics of different populations. So if I know they're interested in it and what it takes to get a sample to them, why not tie into research programs that are working on this and saying, all right, turns out you have garlic mustard. There's a group doing a genetic study on garlic mustard. They'd really like you to give them a sample. Would you go out and do this for them? And it's helping just close the loop and start to further a lot of the research and development to get better control tactics, know more about how these populations are moving around and how their genetics are changing. Being that I tend to hang out on the ag side quite a bit, I'm really more excited about some of the stuff we're looking at for georeferencing resources for management. That if I just found out you have Joro spider and now you're up into Tennessee, where I believe we've got a county or two that's popped up. Well, here's the Tennessee guidelines for what you should do about Joro spider. And just kind of locating that information, getting that extra mile to the people that are reporting, because a lot of them, they're new to invasives, they're new to different pests showing up, and they really need help just to know what to do after they have the problem. So it's a lot of things we're looking at just to improve EDDMapS and continue that flow. Once the data gets in the system, that's not it. That's not the end of the road. Now we need to inform management. We need to get people engaged. And how do we better do that through what we can provide? So with that, I'm probably a little early. Plus, I think we started early to start with, but if you have questions, happy to address any.
Thanks. That was fantastic. Really exciting to imagine what this field is going to look like in the future as you're rolling all these things out. There was a question, are there any interests or efforts in incorporating historic data records from these diagnostic labs into EDDMapS if they are willing to share that data?
There are many efforts. With that comes lots of different discussions. Some, is any of that data confidential? Would it, on the ag side, have trade implications? The National Plant Diagnostic Network does have a repository of data, and we've been working with them over a number of years, coming up with how data could be exchanged between the systems. For many of those diagnostic labs, that's for the last about 15 years, maybe 20 years that they have their data digital. I know some of them have data going back to, here's my index cards of when we had diagnoses in the lab, and they kept great records. They're all on paper. So there's been conversations about what resources would it take to make that happen. It's the same thing you have in working with museums and other collections. So yeah, plenty of great conversations on pulling that together. It's an area we spend a lot of time in for EDDMap, because we started as a data aggregator and we still are. So how do we connect to all these data sources and bring more information to the table to make better decisions?
Yeah, that's definitely a big task. I don't see any. Oh, here we go. We had one more question. How many labs are using EDDMapS?
There's currently 45 labs that are listed in EDDMapS. Some of those, admittedly, got in to go, hey, labs in EDDMapS, I want to see what's going on here. And they haven't done much more than look at the protocols other labs were using. but we've had about a dozen that are actively using it where we've had concentration on rosette disease, some herbicide resistance issues. It's tended to be driven more topically because the diagnostic labs in many cases do have lab management systems already in place. And so where they choose to spend time on it is where there has been funding and a driver to say, all right, we want to have this from citizen scientists or people in the field reporting all the way to the lab and verification and management covered. All right, now we'll come in and start working with this.
Gotcha. All right, well, I think we are going to keep moving. Laura, if you are ready, you can go ahead and pull your slides up. Thanks again for that great presentation. Next, we're going to hear from Laura Van Ripper. Laura, is that Ripper or Riper?
Riper, yeah.
Riper, sorry. Laura Van Riper has been the Terrestrial Invasive Species Program Coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Invasive Species Unit since 2010. Laura works with invasive species policy, management, prevention, and outreach. Key responsibilities include improving invasive species prevention, management, and mapping, as well as coordinating and developing invasive species projects and policies with outside organizations. Before working for the DNR, Laura earned a PhD in ecology from the University of Minnesota.
Thanks. It is not wanting to connect to my PowerPoint. Let's see if I try this. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Super.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. I really appreciate being able to chat with you. Yeah, my name's Laura Van Riper. I work for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and I'm going to talk about how we've been using EDDMapS as our one-stop shop for all invasive organisms in Minnesota. So as you might have seen in Chuck's beginning presentation, a lot of reports in EDDMapS are plants. And I want to highlight some of the other things that we're using it for. So things like insects, earthworms, pathogens, aquatic plants, aquatic animals, and then of course terrestrial plants are of big importance to us as well. So we have a lot of different users in the state, both people putting data in and using the data. State agencies, our Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, and Department of Transportation have all committed to sharing data into EDDMapS, and so our data is widely available. We have a lot of local partners, so groups like cooperative weed management areas. We have counties that have aquatic invasive species programs, county agricultural inspectors, lots of great county data. We have Conservation Corps, which is hired to do a lot of work in the state, as well as independent contractors. So all different local partners putting information in. Our University of Minnesota has led a number of participatory science projects. I'll talk about those a little bit more in the talk as well. Things like Starry Trek, where people are out on accesses, reporting at water accesses, reporting invasive species they're observing, and some extension projects I'll talk about too. We get EDDMapS reports in from the general public, people who are interested and put reports in. And then of course, we also work with researchers. So how is the data used? We found it really helpful to have this data all in one spot to help inform things like policies and regulations. It's really important to understand, what species are here, what species are nearby, how widespread are they? All that kind of information informs policies and regulations. It's also really helpful for prevention efforts to know where things are and how to focus those prevention efforts around them. In terms of actually developing management plans, having that data all in one place is really helpful. You can see, how the species are across land ownership boundaries. So for example, we have one high priority site that's part Department of Transportation land and part Department of Natural Resources land, and the plants go right across it. So it's great to have, all of that data in one spot. We've also found it's really helpful for continuity of data. So if someone has reports just on their work computer and they change positions or retire, sometimes that data can get lost. But if we get all that data into EDDMapS, we've got that continuity over time. We've also found it helpful for tracking management efforts. So I'll show an example of that for the non-native Phragmites project, where there's really a statewide effort to do management, and you can mark reports as managed and start seeing some of that progress you're making on management. Also have been helpful for information on cold hardiness and distribution. So Minnesota, we are known for being cold, right? So the question will often come up, well, do you think this species is going to be able to survive in Minnesota? And sometimes we can just pull up EDDMapS reports and see spots where it's clearly survived for multiple years and is spreading. And that's really helpful for us to know. It's also helpful to have information on how species are moving and spreading over time. One question I get is about ways that we can use the data and share the data. So for example, our DNR land managers might want to manipulate the data within their GIS where they've got their own additional layers they can put onto it. So we regularly download all the EDDMapS data into GIS files. We make them available to staff through our internal system, and then it's also available to the public. In Minnesota, we have something called the Minnesota Geospatial Commons, where we make data available. And so if you go there, search for invasives, you'll see the terrestrial invasive species observations, the aquatic invasive species observations, layers that people can download. That data all comes from EDDMapS. You can also use this data for custom maps. We saw a nice presentation on that. The photo on the right there is a screenshot of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture pulling in EDDMapS data, putting it into an online map, in this case highlighting the high priority prohibited eradicate noxious weeds in the state and where they're found. So having that map with all those species on there right in one place for people to view that. So let's get into some of those species examples. So here we've got the brown marmorated stink bug. Insects are regulated under our Department of Agriculture. So they've found EDDMapS helpful for tracking brown marmorated stink bug. If you look at the map, that big cluster of reports is the St. Paul, Minneapolis metro area. And it's been helpful for them to see how brown marmorated stink bug is spreading outside of those urban areas to the more rural areas. It's been helpful data for orchards to know how nearby brown marmorated stink bugs are. They've also used the data for assessing potential biological control research sites. And similarly to the noxious weed program, they also do some pulling of the data to manipulate to maps that they have embedded on their website. Emerald ash borer is another big invasive insect issue. Using EDDMapS has helped with some new county records. They also feed this into one of their own maps that they have online. And they found the data helpful for determining generally infested areas, which feeds into regulations around which counties are allowed movement, and have been really helpful for helping understand where to focus their survey and outreach efforts. The next taxa group are earthworms. So Minnesota, we were covered by giant glaciers thousands of years ago. So we have no native earthworms. All of our earthworms are non-native. And there's been a lot of research on the impacts of earthworms in Minnesota's forests and the negative impacts that they have had there. A newer species to our region are jumping worms, Amenthus species, and we've been trying to better understand their distribution in the state. So one kind of neat example here, the top map shows what we knew about jumping worm distribution on August 27th, 2020. We kind of knew that the Twin Cities metro area and some of southeast Minnesota had confirmed jumping worms. We had about 30 reports in the Twin Cities area. We did a big press release on August 31st. It got widely picked up. We got a lot of coverage and people got reports into me at the DNR, and I helped get those reports into EDDMapS. So we can see that afterwards we have a better understanding of where jumping worms have been found in the state. And we've got about 111 reports now in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So it's neat to be able to see the results of our outreach effort. And then when people ask us where they've been found, it's very easy to share that data out. This is where I make a little plug. So I have not been able to figure out a one-stop shop where everybody's putting their worm data into. It's hard to find national level maps of worm distribution. So if you have an earthworm data set, I'd really encourage you to share that data with EDDMapS so we can get more accurate maps. Jumping worms have a more widespread distribution than what you see there, but those are some of the states that are more actively sharing data about jumping worms into EDDMapS. So I encourage you, if you work with worms, I'd love to see more data in EDDMapS. That'd be great. To switch up to pathogens, here's a oak wilt picture there. For forest pathogens, oak wilt is probably the most common one that gets reported in. And it's not that common to see reports come in for pathogens, but it is an option. And I just wanted to highlight here, if you haven't looked at the EDDMapS website of the different reporting forms for the various taxa groups, they do vary. So if you look at the pathogen reporting form, you can see that there's some things that they ask for those that they don't ask for others. So you can say what the host species is that you're seeing. You can put information in on the type of damage to plants or the damage severity. So it's pretty neat that there's that, customization around the type of organism that's getting reported. For our Department of Agriculture, they're following agricultural pathogens, and they've highlighted that there is this IPM PIPE site, Integrated Pest Management Pest Information Platform for Extension and Education, and EDDMapS data feeds into that. And so they have found that helpful. So this is another example of a site that's taking EDDMapS data and then packaging it as is needed for its audience. So it shows things like historical maps of distribution, how things like tar spotted corn have changed over time. And then that information can help state workers decide where to focus their survey efforts. For aquatic invasive species, again, all taxa here. So from aquatic plants, fish, we've got some goldfish pictures there, zebra mussels, spiny water fleas, all aquatic taxa can be reported into EDDMapS as well. Highlighted the European water clover photo there, because that one was one that was just recently confirmed in a natural area in the state, and now has an EDDMapS report for it. Here's that Phragmites project that I mentioned. So there is a statewide project focused on non-native Phragmites management, and it's working with partners throughout the state. And it's really helpful. All the reports of Phragmites can get into EDDMapS, and then as revisits are done and those sites are treated, you can mark them as treated. And so then on the map, you start seeing, hopefully over time, you'll see more of the yellow and less of the red, and can really start giving that story, about work that's being done on a statewide level to manage non-native Phragmites. So it's really helpful to have that image to go with that. One other thing that Minnesota is known for is the land of 10,000 lakes. And people would like to know, which lakes have invasive species in them. If you go to the Minnesota Tools or the EDDMapS Tools website page, there's a Minnesota Tools section, and we have an infested waters list of lakes and rivers that have key aquatic invasive species. And so sometimes people want to know what invasive species are in my favorite lake or the lake I'm planning to go to. They can easily search that in the list, or if they want to look at more of a map view, that's an option too. So they click on it, they see this map. And then if you click on one of those, so in the little inset photo, I had clicked on Lake Mille Lacs, and then it shows you the invasive species found in that lake. All right, and then just to wrap up, the next thing is participatory science. We have had a number of participatory science projects that have fed data into EDDMapS. So this is University of Minnesota Extension, their terrestrial invasive species projects they've got coming up for 2023. One is going to focus on looking for spotted lanternfly. So we have not found spotted lanternfly in Minnesota, but we have EDDMapS report of various host plant species. So we can use those EDDMapS reports to help direct volunteers for places where they could go and look for spotted lanternfly. Mock strawberry is another project of a species we don't really understand its distribution in the state very well. So we can ask volunteers to use EDDMapS to make mock strawberry reports, put those pictures in. And then finally, some of you might be familiar with this regional level project to map garlic mustard aphids. So these tiny little blue aphids that have been found on garlic mustard. So we can have people put those reports in. And one nice thing for me is that there's a national level verifier for those. So people in Minnesota can put the reports in, and an expert in another state can see the reports and verify them. So that's really helpful. Yeah, and then just to wrap up, just wanted to show some nice examples of ways that EDDMapS can be used for other species beyond plants, and that how it can be beneficial when multiple organizations are feeding data into one central location and easily able to access that data and use it for better decision making. And with that, I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Laura. That was fantastic. I don't see any questions yet, but if anybody has questions for Laura, feel free to throw those in the Q&A. If not, I think we can keep moving. Rebecca, we've got our last session today.
Yep, I'm ready when you are.
Yeah, take it away.
So I'm going to be talking about tips and tricks relating to using EDDMapS. Some of this was touched on in other presentations, but we, as with any long summit, will have fluctuations in attendees. So some of this you're just going to see again, and some maybe you missed Chuck's top presentation, or one of the other presentations. So hopefully this will catch the people who missed those. So the idea behind this kind of presentation I wanted to have was setting yourself up for success. And most of what we ended up talking about with people is that they find that the more time they can spend in the field, doing their job, or however they want to phrase it, and the less time they can spend in the office trying to do stuff, on a computer or whatever, the more successful they feel, the more they feel like they're affecting some sort of change. So the ideas I came up with for this talk kind of 4 big points, and I'll go into 3 of those kind of more in depth. Pick the right reporting tool. So what do you need? What does your staff need? What do volunteers need? Chuck went over some of these tools we have. Kevin went over some of the tools and so on and so forth. So I'll kind of distill it all down to one slide. Know where things are. So I'll talk about the alerts. I'll talk about some of the maps again. And I'm not going to get into the EDDMapS verification, but our EDDMapS verifiers, which we've talked about here and there in some of these different talks, the EDDMapS verifiers see reports before anybody else will, because they are the ones who review those records that then could become publicly available. So they're the ones that are helping to get this data through from the reporter to the public. So we've gone over EDDMapS verification in our previous summits. We have a lot of training materials on the training page regarding reviewing records. So there's a lot of information out there about it, but I just did want to point out that they're the first ones, other than the reporters, who will be notified when something gets reported. The next concept is identification. So there's a lot of identification tools. Chuck mentioned the species info pages on EDDMapS. There's field guides in a couple of the apps that we have, and he also mentioned earlier about trying to incorporate identification assistance into some of the apps to help people to be able to identify those. But another aspect of identification is that EDDMapS verifier network. The verifiers are assisting in the correct identification of these reports. So in some cases, the reporter gets it correct and it goes through. And in some cases, the reporter maybe misses an identification characteristic and that gets corrected. Or in some cases, the report is marked as negative. So the report remains, but they looked for, say, garlic mustard, but it was, say, like a native violet. So it was marked as negative. They looked for garlic mustard and did not find it. That's another possibility. So these EDDMapS verifiers do help in the identification of these records as they come in. And then finally, keeping data together. So we've talked about the advanced query tools briefly. I'm going to talk about it again from another aspect. But the idea of keeping data together when it's difficult otherwise, that's where the concept of the EDDMapS projects come in. So if you have a particular grant, if you have an awareness campaign, something like that, where there's not a way to easily query it using our available tools, the EDDMapS projects concept is where that can come into play. And we announced EDDMapS projects at the last summit. We added some additional features, and after you announce something and people start using it, we fixed some bugs that came along. But I'm going to talk about projects again in a little bit, as again a way of uniting data that would be difficult using the other available tools, such as the advanced query tool. So which app should you use? This was a question that came up earlier in the Q&A box. So think about who your audience is. For EDDMapS Pro, we're talking about land managers and professionals, people who know how to ID things, who need a lot of additional features to be able to do their job. That's where EDDMapS Pro comes in. The EDDMapS app is trained volunteers, citizen scientists. These are people who, I'm just going to walk around my neighborhood and, oh, I found another mimosa. I found another, Japanese knotweed, things like that. These are people, they might be your master gardeners, master naturalists, part of your friends of group, river keepers, people who are already kind of invested in some aspect of, being trained to do things in a natural setting. And then you have Wild Spotter, which is going to be very site-based, very location-based. You're recruiting from people who are potentially only going to visit maybe once or, maybe just infrequently on an individual basis, but maybe you have a lot of people coming in as a whole. So you're going to try to pick species that these recreationalists and casual observers are going to be able to ID, as well as your EDRR type species. For EDDMapS Pro, the reportable species, they can be any invasive or pest or biocontrol species we have in our database. You create your own list of things you want to report. The EDDMapS app, it's similar in that you can, when you download the EDDMapS app, you pick your state, province, whatever, and you'll get a species list from that selection, but you can add your own species in the My Species section, which means you can report anything you feel you need to report. And then there's also another option if you have mobile signal called Search, where you can search for live any species in our database. With Wild Spotter, it's based on the site's prioritized list. So again, if you're a national park and you have 10 species you want people to report when they're out recreating, those 10 species are the species they can report. The EDDMapS app and the EDDMapS Pro app do have negative reporting, which is I looked for something and did not find it. Those are really important for EDRR species. So, spotted lanternfly, brown marmorated stink bug, emerald ash borer, different things like that, where you're wanting to keep track of it and monitor places regularly for it. That's really important. So those are in the EDDMapS Pro and the EDDMapS app. WildSpotter does not currently have negative reporting. It's just focused on people hiking, camping, canoeing, whatever. Ah, yes, I found this thing. The EDDMapS Pro and EDDMapS apps are county and coordinate based. So you can say, I saw this thing at this location. They both have the option for private or hide my exact location, so that you can obscure the coordinates to the county level if it's a particularly sensitive area or something else is going on. WildSpotter has that as well, but because you are selecting the location you're in, that park, that forest, whatever, that's an additional component that provides a location basis. Revisits you can do in the EDDMapS Pro app. There is a revisit form. In the EDDMapS app, there is no form in the app, but I have heard of people when they have signal using the map feature in the field guide to navigate outside the app to our website. And they're essentially going through the website to get to a revisit option. I really do recommend, if you're going to be revisiting records, just use EDDMapS Pro. It's much, much easier than, doing a whole bunch of different steps. With WildSpotter, there's currently no revisit form in the app either. With EDDMapS Pro, you have the option to download the records for offline use. So you're getting a static version of a data set to interact with. EDDMapS app and the WildSpotter app do not have that. The EDDMapS app, you can see a live version of the map of points, but you can't, you have to have signal for that. There's no downloading of that data for a local copy. Background maps, Kevin briefly mentioned these in his talk earlier. There are background maps downloadable for certain states and counties for offline use. So again, you're in an area with no signal. That means you're not going to have a Google map to put those points on. So we have certain states and counties downloaded. If you want your state, county, whatever, to have background maps and it's not currently available, you can send us an email and let us know. Background maps for the EDDMapS app are, again, just if you have mobile signal. With WildSpotter, there are maps that are based on the sites. So it's not a county map, it's a site map that you can download as background for those particular sites. The EDDMapS Pro app does not have a field guide. Again, this is for professionals. There's the expectation that there's going to be a certain level of expertise with regards to identification, but also because you can download maps and download data and all these different things, there had to be a certain amount of decision making for how to keep the app as small as possible so the most number of people could use it. So there is no field guide in EDDMapS Pro. There is a field guide in the EDDMapS app and for WildSpotter. And again, it's based off of the state, province, site that you have selected. So you need to select that before you have no signal if you're going to change where you're going. And then currently reporting into projects, I mentioned projects a few minutes ago. You can do that directly from EDDMapS Pro for the projects you are a member of. It's not currently an option in the EDDMapS app or WildSpotter, but if you are using the EDDMapS app or WildSpotter, you can reassign data to different projects on the website, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. So this is kind of a snapshot of the decisions you kind of need to think about when you're saying what app you're going to use or what app you're going to recommend the people you work with, either volunteers or employees or coworkers or whatever, should use. So in trying to figure out, how to not be on the computer constantly, the best ways to get information to come to you, in my opinion. So that's where these alerts come in. Chuck mentioned them in his talk at the beginning of this. So You click on My EDDMapS, you click on Alerts, and this is how you set up alerts. You pick your geographic area and what type of invasive you're looking for. So division would be plant, insect, wildlife, disease. Those are your options. Or if you want to get more specific, you can go into category, which is if you're only interested in aquatic plants, you would select your geographic area and then go down to category and select aquatic plants. Or if you have a particular species or a certain species list in mind, we do have people who create alerts for specific species if they have a very narrow focus. Say, all I care about is spotted lanternfly. So I want to know where spotted lanternfly is, but I also want to know where tree of heaven is, because tree of heaven is an important host for spotted lanternfly. So I might make an alert for those two species. So as you create your alerts, you'll then get emails when those parameters are met. You're not going to get an email every day. You'll just get an email when those parameters are met with the list of records that came in. And these are verified records. These are records that have been reviewed by the EDDMapS Verification Network or came in through an expert source, because we do have data that comes in, if it's literature data that was published, things like that, that data will come in already reviewed. So this is the type of email you can expect to get. Talked about maps earlier. Some of the previous presentations went into them pretty thoroughly. So this is the current list of options for a large number, not all of the species, but a large number, especially of plants. These three types of maps are fairly new. We've had the future range and future certainty for a while, and I do know people have used them. The future abundance was talked about very in depth earlier. But these three types of maps are going to help you to figure out where species will likely be based on, habitats, but, where they'll also be potentially in the future. So future certainty helps you identify where something will potentially be. Same with future habitat. And then future range, you can use that to compare against current data and future data. Location maps were talked about earlier. Chuck went into them, so I'm just going to cover them again in case they were missed, as well as I'm going to talk about a couple other things related to them. So if you go to the tools page and you click on species status report by other geographic locations. So this isn't your state, this isn't your county. These are other types of geographic locations. And that's the best way we could put it, because it's just such a wide range what could be in there. So if you click on that, you'll then fill out your country and at least your state or province. The more you fill out, the more you don't have to scroll through as much. So if you can fill out a county or jurisdiction or whatever equivalent exists for county equivalent, that'll give you a list of options that will be more local to the area you're interested in. So you will notice that there's like Rocky Mountain Forest Reserve on here a few times. You'll see that. You'll also see some other ones that might not be easily decipherable, because this is based on the data that was provided to us. But in some cases, there are going to be where a location or a property or an area was split into multiple entries, and that's just how it was provided to us. So you might have to do a little bit of trial and error if, say, you're interested in Rocky Mountain Forest Reserve or something similar. You would click on the link that you're interested in, and in this case, this is one of the Rocky Mountain Forest Reserves, and you'll see that it outlines the area. In this case, It's a kind of a long skinny one. You can set your buffer distance if you want to include what could be nearby. The eradication status, so positive, I saw it, treated, I saw it and treated it, performed some sort of control measure, eradicated, it's no longer there, hopefully. And negative, we looked for and did not find it. Those are also in the legend at the bottom left of the map, so that you know what point represents what. And then in the bottom, there's a list of a table of the list of species that are reflective of your choices. So there's no buffer distance. All of the records that are in this particular geographic area are showing up. So that's what's showing up on the map. And then if I wanted to change something, so in this case, I got rid of eradicated and negative. So theoretically, these are just the records that are there that you would expect to be able to find based on the last known status of that population. And you'll notice that the count has changed comparing oxeye daisy from the left to the right, because we got rid of, maybe there was negative or eradicated populations of oxeye daisy. And then when you go to download this, it'll be whatever is that current table. So, you know, if you downloaded it on the right, you'd have 206 count for oxeye daisy compared to the 212 on the left. So you can use these types of maps and queries to help you identify the species in your area of responsibility, especially if you're not a county or similarly easy kind of area. Another way to view these types of maps, so in this case, I'm looking at an individual record of Kogong grass. And in the bottom left, this has always existed, not always, but in the last few years, this information has been available. These are now live links. So if you click on, say, Six Rivers SYSMA, it will take you to the map of Six Rivers SYSMA. So you can see all of the points that fall within, in this case, Six Rivers SYSMA. I should have picked something with fewer S's. And again, you will see the list of species that are present in this particular geographic area. So we do have the SYSMA boundaries for Florida. And so you can play around with that, the other geographic areas to figure out if the one you're responsible for or one you work in a lot is present in there. I mentioned the advanced query tool earlier. We did add this advanced query tools walkthrough right above the reporter section. So that can give you some additional information about what each individual field means and what you can expect out of it. So I did want to talk about this because that this other geographic locations, it's the same thing as here. So in this case, I picked City of Kawartha Lakes, which is in Kawartha Lakes, Ontario. And so this is the result from that. So these, you know, there's around 2,000 records in this, but because I created this as a query, and I can add, maybe I just care about plants, maybe I just care about certain date ranges, or maybe I don't care about the negative records. You can add all of those query parameters into the advanced query tool. And like Chuck mentioned earlier, you can save this query. And when you save it, you can rerun it, or you can use it in EDDMapS Pro. So if I go to my EDDMapS and then my saved queries, it shows up here, and you can click on any of these and run and see the current results for that query. It's like a saved recipe, and you're just making it over and over again. And you can create a new data set. So if this isn't quite what I'm looking for today, you can go back to the advanced query tools and create a new saved query. And then any of these are available in your EDDMapS Pro to download and interact with in EDDMapS Pro. The My Species list is another one I mentioned earlier. So this is where you create your own species list. So my EDDMapS, My Species list, and you can add from an existing species list if that one exists for your state. You can also add individual species one by one. You can remove species, clear your whole list, start over. But this species list that you create will be in the My List of the EDDMapS app, which is on the left. So that's My List. And then on the right, when you go to add a subject to your record, when you're creating a new record in EDDMapS Pro, it'll show up as one of, as the options. The options for reportable species in EDDMapS Pro are your My List, and any projects that you're part of, it will also automatically add their list as well. The EDDMapS Pro tools, so this is a, I'm getting into some of the stuff that Kevin talked about earlier. So the EDDMapS Pro tools are kind of gathered there under the collapsible there. And so we'll just go through those quickly. So my counties, these are the counties that you would say you're responsible for or you're working in. You select your counties because that allows you to download any maps that may exist and also to download the entire county's data set. So you can download in EDDMapS Pro your saved query data set or county level data sets. So those are the two types of data sets you can download. Photo projects was another thing, again, Kevin mentioned. So this is what it looks like on the website when you go under EDDMapS Pro tools, and then you click on photo projects. You'll see any photo projects you've already created. You can create new photo projects. You can download the images. If you're adding a new photo project, this is what it looks like. The photo projects aren't specifically tied to any particular record. It's a way to get the big picture. So if you're looking at a field that you're responsible for, it might have 20 different invasive species in it, and maybe biocontrol agents and other things going on. This is how you get the big picture of what it looks like over time and the changes that happen over time. And you can share the photo projects with other people as well. We've gone back and forth about what this is called. Right now, it's currently called project areas. It's been called MyKMLs. Because project has been used so many different ways and different times for different things, we're going to probably call this either My Boundaries or Boundary Areas. You can upload a KML file. You can draw the boundary area. You can share it with other people. What this looks like is this. So in EDDMapS Pro, when you turn on your project area or your boundary or whatever you want to call it, it's a way of seeing an area. There's no current way to use these to do any sort of data selection. This is just a visual representation of an area that maybe you are working in, maybe you need to avoid going in it. However, you need to use these areas. And again, you can share these so other people can access them too, to be able to use them. So when people talk with me about EDDMapS Pro, it can seem kind of daunting to say, oh, these are all the things that you need to do to set yourself up for success. So, but once you kind of set yourself up the one time, it's really just little updates and checks here and there. So with any of these things that you're participating in or features you're utilizing, all you have to do is kind of go through and say, okay, I'm going out for the day. I want to make sure that my county data set is refreshed. My saved query is refreshed, because those are, again, static versions of things. However, a lot of these other things may not change on a day-to-day basis. You may not be changing your project areas or boundaries. You may not be changing where you're working, so you don't need to update and make sure you have, you know, today's version of aerial maps or road maps. And some of these things should update automatically, but you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date version of different lists. One thing I didn't put directly on here is that your upload queue, you always want to make sure your upload queue is anything any data you took previously that should be uploaded should go into the database. That way it gets reviewed and potentially becomes publicly available. You don't want data to sit on your phone for days, weeks, months, whatever. Something that I don't think has been mentioned yet, but we do have help menus on many of the pages, screens of EDDMapS Pro. So it's that little question mark at the top. There's a couple different ways this can look once you tap on it. It can look like almost like a PDF page that comes up, but it tells you everything you should expect to see on that screen and what that screen means. Or in the case of the invasives map, which is kind of the home page of EDDMapS Pro, if you tap on that help icon, you'll see in this case what all of the possible icons mean for representing essentially data on that screen. So the Pro help menus, I think we might have talked about it at the last summit, but I'm not 100% certain. So I wanted to make sure that you knew what that question mark meant. It's a way to help guide you through the app. Going back to the website, Chuck mentioned earlier bulk revisits. So bulk revisits is a feature in Pro Tools in the My EDDMapS section. So what you would do is if you're just hand spraying things or, you know, taking care of just a few things at a location, it really makes a lot of sense to revisit those things while you're still out there. But if you're doing aerial applications, if you're, you know, running a roadside sprayer and you're just spraying just all day, or you have a huge volunteer effort to go out and pull all the plants, the invasive plants in an area where you know it's heavily infested. This is where bulk revisits is really helpful. So you would zoom into the area that you worked in, we'll say. You would click, there's a little magnifying glass icon in the top. You would click that, and what that would do is it would add all the points to the map. You would then draw a polygon around the area that you worked in. So I already did that. That's a red polygon. The other option is you can upload a KML so that you can put the polygon in there without having to draw it. When you do that, it changes the table that appears below that map to show that the records that are in that particular area, in that particular polygon that you uploaded or drew. You can then select the records that you are saying you revisited, and you would fill out this revisit form. It's automatically going to assign the revisit record to you as the logged in account. It's automatically going to put in the subject as the subject of the original record. It already knows the location. You can't change that. So all you're going to do is, you know, are these all positive because you're there and you didn't work? Are they all treated because, you know, you did management efforts? You can add your observation date if that's a different day than the current date, and add any additional comments. It's a very simple form. There's not a lot of options, and most of it's already filled out for you. So we worked with our partners on how to make that situation where it's my job to go out and treat invasive species, and I'm going to do it all day, and I'm not going to be able to every 5 minutes, okay, this is the one I'm revisiting now. Okay, this is the one I'm revisiting now. To make it as easy as possible. So again, you don't have to spend all that time on your phone or on your computer. And finally, I want to talk about projects. So again, projects are a way, I've shown you the advanced query tool. I've shown you the location maps. you know, there's a lot of different ways of looking at data, of getting an idea of the data in an area or at a time or belonging to certain people. But projects are a way to unite data that would be difficult otherwise. Now, to get to projects, you go to My EDDMapS, and then there's projects, and you would select the type of project that you're part of. So in this case, I'm showing you what the example project is. I am an admin of the example project, so I have a lot of options here on the left. If I'm just a user or a participant in the project, I would only have the dashboard, my records, contact admins, and leave project as my options. But as a project admin, I have a lot more options for managing records and so forth. To get records into projects, you have two options. You can use EDDMapS Pro and directly report into the project. That option is on the record form. It's right at the top. Or you can move records into a project later if you're not using EDDMapS Pro, or if you have data from a while ago you want to put in there. Projects, the walkthrough on projects, we have a lot of information relating to projects available on the tools and training, on the training page. So you can go to there and you'll see there's a projects walkthrough, and there's a projects presentation from the last summit, and there was a office hours on projects last year as well. But I want to show you what moving data into projects looks like. So you'll have to be in the project it's already in. So if you've previously reported into, using the EDDMapS Pro app or the website or whatever, that's where the data is assigned to. So in this case, I have 7 entries in the example project. So I can go to my records, which is what I'm looking at currently, and I can select the records that I want to move. So in this case, a record of lightning and a record of boundary point. And then you'll see in the top right that there's a little 2 next to the Move Records button. So I've selected my records. I'm going to select Move Records. I'm going to say what project that I'm also in that I want to move those records to. So in this case, I'm saying the demo project. But there's a problem because the demo project isn't accepting boundary point as a subject in the project. So it has to match. So in this case, I could move all of my lightning records over to the demo project if I wanted to, but it would not accept any of my boundary point records. So that is a limitation you have to be aware of. And we mentioned this all throughout there, but you'll see that blue message at the bottom that project admins can see information that would not normally be public. So project admins will be able to see private coordinates, they'll be able to see anonymous names and so forth. When you put data in a project, that is one of the reasons people wanted a project, was to be able to see information that wouldn't normally be public. So everywhere we could, we put that notification that, your data in a project is not the same level of private that it would be to the public. So that's kind of the end of my frequently asked questions and tips and tricks kind of section. Looks like we have plenty of time for questions either about this particular presentation, or if you have questions about any previous presentations. I think most, if not all, of our previous presenters are here. And also, this is my email address here, and I think some of the other presenters have shown their email addresses as well for additional questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. It looks like we have one question sitting in the Q&A right now. If submitting EDDMapS data to your state, can you still revisit bulk data to make changes before they take the data into their system?
If submitting, so I'm not entirely certain the logistics of this.
You have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's going to, I guess it would depending on the timing and probably what state you're in and how often they pull the data from EDDMapS into their state database if they're maintaining a separate database from EDDMapS. A lot of the states that we are partnering with now are just using EDDMapS as their database. They may pull a copy as to use in their internal systems, but EDDMapS is kind of the database of record for most of the states, especially the states that are requiring data go into EDDMapS. So I think the answer is yes, that it would be a timing issue if anything, if they pull the data, today and then tomorrow you do the bulk revisit, then it wouldn't be they pulled it. But I think everybody that's pulling data like that is pulling it on a regular basis. So they would eventually at least get updated in the system that way.
Yeah, and when data is downloaded, and I think I showed that on the advanced query tool page, but you can say, what type of data you want to download, if you want to download original and revisits or just original records. So we do have that option if they're pulling data out that way as well.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Last call, throw them in the Q&A if you've got any questions or if you've got any 2 cents you want to throw to the group. If not, please take a moment to fill out our survey here. So I know Chuck posted it in the chat. Let me post it again so it's right top for everyone. You can use the QR code as well, but that feedback is really helpful for designing this summit to be as effective as possible. I also want to just take a moment to shout out our sponsors one more time. So this would not have been possible without the Washington Invasive Species Council, the Montana Department of Agriculture, Invasive Species Center, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, Utah Weed Supervisors Association, Colorado Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Invasive Species Advisory Council, and the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. And Chuck, thanks to you and your crew for putting on a great program here. All right, we do have one more question. How would you enter a species if you found dead specimens and no live ones, such as spotted lanternfly? I would like to track the data, but also note no live or larvae were found.
So on our reporting forms for, I don't know if it's for insects, but I know for wildlife, we do have life status as an option. So you can say alive, dead, unknown. I don't know if insects we have that option. I know we have life stage as an option, but you can always put in the comments section that, all of the organisms you observed of the species of record were dead at the time. So that is an option as well. And we do have people who are interested in that.
Right. Would you recommend EDDMapS or EDDMapS Pro for conservation for crews?
It really, again, depends on what that crew needs. If you're talking about summer interns who are only going to be there for like 3 months and are not experienced in identification and are not going to be doing revisits, then the EDDMapS app would be an appropriate one to for them to use because it has the field guide in it. It doesn't have the revisit form. If you're talking about people who are employees and they're going to be doing this the whole growing season and they're doing revisits and treating and going back to different areas, that's where EDDMapS Pro becomes more useful because, again, you can download the existing data to do the revisits. You can, have those boundary areas so that you can say, okay, this is the crew working in this area, this is the crew working in that area, and you can assign them to, to use those particular project areas or boundary areas. You can do a lot more with Pro, but not everybody needs all those features. And so like Chuck mentioned earlier, the reason we have WildSpotter and EDDMapS Pro is that it's for the intended audience. We make it so that the intended audience has what they exactly need as much as possible, and not any of the extra stuff they don't need.
Yeah, there's the field guide is, I mean, if you don't need the field guide, but you know, at the same time, you can easily put both apps on your phone and have the field guide in the EDDMapS app. And then if you're collecting, you know, where I usually draw the line is if you're collecting a lot of data, you know, 100 points or 50 points or more a day, is probably going to be faster to collect that data in EDDMapS Pro than it is in the EDDMapS app. And especially if you're doing polygons and you want to be able to use the new walk the polygon feature, then that's another thing that is only available in EDDMapS Pro at this point. So well, thanks to all the speakers as well that came in and shared their perspective on what they're doing with EDDMapS. We want to all of these presentations will be available on the EDDMapS website and on through NASMA as well. So please feel free to go back and refer to them and you know, respond to the survey, because it'll help us determine how we do this in future years. And there's no more questions, then let's all go home for the day if you're on the East Coast anyway.
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks to all of our speakers and everyone who helped to make today happen. And as everybody's mentioned, please check out NASMA's website and other upcoming events. Thanks so much and take care.